Chapter 1587. With the support of the innate skill tree, his spirit chi could circulate freely in his body, but if he continued to drift along like this, it would be impossible to find the tiger-shark battleship, because everyone was spinning in the same direction at the same speed. If he wanted to find the tiger-shark battleship, he would have to increase his speed, surpassing the speed of the magnetic storm. Thinking of this, Lu Yi madly urged his spirit chi and rushed forward in the direction of the magnetic storm. Looking from a distance, the starry sky magnetic storm was like a huge tornado that covered a large area of the starry sky. Lu Yi could not determine the exact location of the tiger-shark battleship at this moment, and his divine sense was in a mess in this place, so even his vision was extremely limited. Lu Yi could only use the most stupid method, which was to spiral along the direction of the tornado and search step by step. This time, he did not have to worry about running into any meteorites because from Lu Ye's point of view, he was chasing after meteorites rotating at high speed. So as long as he was careful, there would not be any problems. The tornado-like starry sky magnetic storm was wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. Lu Yi constantly expanded his search range, but he found nothing. He was secretly anxious. Although the quality of the tiger-shark battleship was good, it could not withstand being tossed around in this place for a long time. Losing a tiger-shark battleship was not a big deal, but without the protection of the tiger-shark battleship, the three cultivators would most likely die. After half an hour, 2 hours, almost 4 hours of searching, Lu Yi himself was dizzy from all the spinning and did not know how far the starry sky magnetic storm had swept him. Just when Yang Kai thought that Wan Gulu and the others were most likely going to die, his eyes suddenly narrowed as he turned to look in a certain direction. Amidst the starry sky debris, a familiar object flashed past. Lu Yi quickly pulled himself together and rushed in that direction. When he got close, he saw a tattered tiger-shark battleship. The battleship originally had a good defensive array, which should have been enough to resist the impact of the debris in the starry sky. But in this starry sky magnetic storm, even the spirit chi in a cultivator's body was sealed, not to mention the tiger-shark battleship's defensive array. The array could not be activated at all. At this moment the warship, which was worth 500,000 spirit jades, was in shambles. It was full of holes, and the entire warship was full of holes. Lu Yi hurriedly came to the side of the tiger-shark battleship and sensed it at close range. He immediately felt relieved. He was still alive. It seemed like the tiger-shark battleship had provided them with a certain level of protection. Otherwise, if their physical bodies were swept in, there would be no way for them to survive. Although the three people inside were still alive, their condition was obviously not good. Lu Yi stuck close to the tiger-shark battleship and peeked through a fist-sized hole, only to see that the three people inside had all fallen unconscious. There was also the smell of blood coming from inside the ship. Obviously, everyone had suffered heavy injuries. Without spiritual power to control, the only thing a cultivator could rely on was their own physical body. None of the three cultivators arranged on this battleship were body cultivators. As the battleship continued to roll and crash, their condition was not very good. Lu Yi stuck himself to the broken warship, looked around, then climbed to the keel of the warship, grabbed it, and tried to escape with the warship. However, while it was easy for him to enter alone, it was difficult for him to bring a battleship with him. After giving it a try, Lu Yi discovered that it was almost impossible. With a thought, the dragon throne appeared. A round ball the size of a baby's head collapsed, and dragon scales covered Lu Ye's body. In the blink of an eye, a 10-meter-tall scarlet figure appeared beside the battleship. Lu Yi felt as if there were invisible needles stabbing into his body, and his foundation was quickly devoured by the dragon throne. He grabbed the keel of the warship and used all his strength to rush in a certain direction. The resistance was great, and meteorites of various sizes slammed into the dragon throne. Lu Yi was not seriously injured, but the warship in his hand was battered even more. If he was alone, he could force his way out like this, but not only did he have to go out by himself, but he also had to ensure the safety of the three people inside the warship. Lu Yi suspected that the warship would be completely destroyed before he could escape with it. If that was the case, the three unconscious people inside would definitely die. It was impossible to force his way out like this. He had to follow the direction of the magnetic storm. Lu Yi immediately changed his course of action. He continued to move rapidly in the direction of the magnetic storm, his speed increasing. This time, however, he did not spiral upwards. Instead, he continued to spin in a certain direction. At a certain point, when his speed reached a certain level, Lu Yi felt himself and the warship being thrown out of the magnetic storm without much effort. The invisible force field that had been lingering around him disappeared, along with the force of the magnetic storm. When Lu Yi looked back, he saw the giant tornado quickly disappearing into the distance. He could not help but let out a long sigh. Dragging the battered warship, he flew forward for a while before coming to a stop. He put away the dragon throne, opened the hatch, and walked into the warship. The smell of blood inside was very strong. 3 cultivators from different realms were lying around in various strange postures. Lu Yi hurriedly went forward to investigate. The 3 of them were not dead, but their injuries were quite serious. It seemed that they would need some time to recover. Lu Yi fed the 3 of them recovery pills before beginning to investigate the warship's situation. The situation was not very good. Most of the warship's functions had failed. After all, it was very difficult to maintain its original functions in such a damaged state. Fortunately, the warship could still be piloted. It was just that its speed could not be increased. Lu Yi guessed that it had something to do with some of the spell formations being destroyed. He did not know much about spell formations, so he did not know how to repair them. Now that he had rescued the people, what he needed to do was to hurry up and meet up with the fleet. He checked the sound talismans and tried to send a message, but the message could not be transmitted. There was only one possibility for this situation, and that was that they were too far away from each other, beyond the range of the sound talismans. The magnetic storm was very fast. He had been stuck in there for more than 4 hours. After being swept away for such a long time, he was definitely very far away from the fleet. Lu Yi did not discover anything special after identifying the surrounding space. Although he had the star map route given to him by the reincarnation tree, it was only a route. It did not include the detailed situation of the chaotic explosion zone. He could identify the stars near the route, but he could not identify the stars beyond the range. Thus, he did not know where he was. He could only advance in the opposite direction of the magnetic storm and hope to encounter the fleet again. The tattered tiger shark warship could not be used anymore. It was too slow. Lu Yi wanted to put it away. After all, it was worth 500,000 spirit jades. It should still be usable after being repaired in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Unexpectedly, the warship was damaged by some unknown spell formation and could not shrink. Although the tiger shark warship was a small warship, it was not something that could be stored in a storage ring. Lu Yi had no choice but to give up. He summoned his star boat, carried the 3 unconscious people onto it, and drove the star boat forward. Fortunately, there were only 3 people. Otherwise, his star boat would not be able to hold them. He thought that if he continued forward, he would encounter a fleet that would search for him. However, he did not expect that after traveling for several days, he still did not see any living beings. Lu Yi knew that the fleet would not give up on him. They would definitely send people to search for him. There was only one reason why he did not encounter them. They were going in the wrong direction. The direction of the starry sky was 3-dimensional, and there was no blind spot in the radiation. Therefore, there were often situations where the slightest deviation could lead to a huge deviation. Lu Yi estimated that he might have missed the direction that the fleet was searching for him. However, he did not panic. If the fleet could not find him, they would continue to move forward. Therefore, as long as he found the correct route and continued forward, he would definitely meet the fleet. Thinking of this, Lu Yi steered the star boat to observe the stars around him, to ensure that he returned to the correct route as soon as possible. At the same time, he asked Wangulu and the others to keep communicating with each other to see if they could contact the fleet. Wangulu and the other 2 people woke up one after another. When they woke up and found that they were still alive, they were all pleasantly surprised. At that time, the 3 of them were already prepared to die. When they were caught in the starry sky magnetic storm, even Luan Xiao could not save them. However, when they woke up, they saw Lu Yi. Wangu Lu was one of them, so there was nothing to say. However, the two late-stage constellation cultivators from the Green Dawn Dao world and the Jade Conch Dao world expressed their sincere gratitude to Lu Yi. This was a life-saving grace, and many cultivators valued this very much. After learning about the current situation, the three of them did not dare to be negligent. While healing their injuries, they kept trying to contact the outside world, trying to get in touch with the fleet. Unfortunately, they did not get anything. At the same time, where the fleet was located, the cultivators of the three realms had a disagreement for the first time. It was mainly the disagreement between the cultivators of the 9 regions and Luan Xiao. The fleet had been searching in this chaotic explosion area for several days, but they had not found the whereabouts of Lu Yi and the other 3 people. There was not even a reply to their messages. The cultivators of the 9 regions naturally insisted on continuing the search because they would not give up on Lu Yi no matter what. They also felt that Lu Yi could not have met with any accident. Now that they had not found him, it was only because they were searching in the wrong direction. Therefore, as long as they expanded the search area, they would definitely gain something. However, Luan Xiao did not agree. It was not that she did not care about Lu Yi's life or death. This time, the cultivators of the 3 realms joined forces to enter the Wanxiang Sea, and it was Lu Yi who facilitated it. He was the one who provided the star chart, and there were many things that she needed his help with in the future. Moreover, Lu Yi went to save people, not only the cultivators of the 9 regions, but also the cultivators of the Jade Conch Dao world. In the face of such a terrifying starry sky magnetic storm, he still rushed in without hesitation. Who would not be moved by such a magnificent feat? If possible, Luan Xiao also wanted to find Lu Yi before setting off. However, as the leader of this fleet, she had a lot of things to consider. After several considerations, she could only decide to continue the fleet's journey. Thus, the disagreement broke out. Chapter 1588. In the past, if a group of early-stage star mansions dared to be so arrogant in front of Luan Xiao would have taught them a lesson about the difference in strength between them. If Yu Yao wanted to use force, how could the early-stage star mansions resist? However, they were cultivators from the 9 provinces after all. How could Luan Xiao use force? She could only persuade them patiently. On a planetary ship in the 9 provinces, Luan Xiao arrived personally. She looked at the star mansions in front of her and said slowly, "You should be the closest people to fellow Taoist Lu. I can understand your feelings. But I just want to ask, do you think fellow Taoist Lu will meet with any accident under such circumstances?" Yi immediately said, "No." She was beside Lu Yi when he rushed out. At that time, Luan Xiao was curious why she wasn't worried at all, and even asked her about it. Luan Xiao observed their expressions and realized that none of the star mansions in front of her seemed to be worried. They were clearly very sure that Lu Yi wouldn't meet with any accident because of the galactic magnetic storm. She didn't know the reason, so she could only wonder why these people had such strong confidence in Lu Yi. She nodded slightly and said, "Since everyone feels that fellow Taoist Lu won't meet with any accident, why do you insist on continuing the search?" Tang Yifeng said, "We have to find him eventually. We can't leave him here alone. It's too pitiful for a child to be left here alone." Luan Xiao looked over. If there are no accidents, fellow Taoist Lu must be looking for the fleet right now. However, he hasn't contacted us, so it's very likely that we're searching in the wrong direction. Once there's a mistake in the direction of the starry sky, it'll be very difficult to find each other. Since you know fellow Taoist Lu, what decision will he make if he notices this? Tang Yifeng and the others all looked pensive. Li Baxian said, "If it's junior brother, he should continue on his way and wait for us in front." This was the answer Luan Xiao wanted. She immediately nodded. "I think so too. This should be the wisest and safest way. So we just need to set off according to plan. Maybe we'll meet fellow Taoist Lu in front as we walk. I've looked at the star map. In another month, we'll be able to leave the chaotic explosion zone and arrive at the Thousand Hills tomb. Rather than searching aimlessly here, why don't we go to the Thousand Hills tomb and take a look? The hierarch and the others silently pondered. Although they didn't want to admit it, they had to admit that what Luan Xiao said was very likely to happen. Lu Yi wasn't a stubborn person. If he really couldn't find any trace of the fleet, he would definitely think of some other way. Continuing on the road was the best choice. Luan Xiao continued. Also everyone, this is the chaotic explosion zone. It's not a place where we can stay for long. Since fellow Taoist Lu has given me the authority to lead this cooperation, I have to take responsibility for the cultivators of the three realms. If we continue to search here, it'll only increase the risk. If fellow Taoist Lu is safe and sound, and is waiting for us in the Thousand Hills tomb, how am I supposed to explain this to fellow Taoist Lu? Seeing that the people in front of her were showing signs of being persuaded, she struck while the iron was hot and said, "Everyone, don't worry. When we reach the Thousand Hills tomb, if fellow Taoist Lu isn't there, the fleet will wait for half a month. If fellow Taoist Lu doesn't appear, I'll personally come back to find him. I'll definitely give everyone an explanation." This was the greatest sincerity that Luan Xiao could express. If the 9 states were still unwilling to cooperate, then they could only go their separate ways. The hierarch looked at the people around him, momentarily unable to make a decision. At the critical moment, Wuxia stepped forward and said softly, "Let's continue on our way. If it's Lu Yi, he won't die." In the past, they could still determine Lu Yi's safety through Hupo's life. However, after returning, Lu Yi had removed the life origin technique, so this method wouldn't work anymore. However, they weren't worried about Lu Yi's safety. When he dared to charge out in that situation, he must have been confident. It was just that they didn't know where he had been swept away by the cosmic magnetic storm. After Wuxia expressed her opinion, the hierarch nodded. "Then we'll follow fellow Taoist Luan's arrangements." After a short while, the fleet continued onward along the route marked on the star map. On the 9-state starship, Yi squatted beside Hupo and poked Yaya's chubby cheeks with her finger. "Don't keep sleeping. Your father is missing. Hurry up and find him." Yaya was drooling from her sleep. After being poked by Yi, she switched positions and fell into a deep sleep in Hupo's arms. "You're so unreliable." Yi was furious. She wanted nothing more than to lift Yaya up and smack her butt. However, she didn't dare to do so when she thought about how this was sunshine. The starship transformed into a streak of light as it shot through the starry sky. Lu Yi stood at the bow of the ship and held a star map in his hand. After a short while, his expression lit up as he had finally found the correct route. Things were much easier now that he had found the correct route. As long as he followed the route, he would be able to leave the chaotic explosion zone and enter the Thousand Mound tomb. After carefully identifying the route for a while, he adjusted his direction slightly, and the starship sped forward at an even faster speed than before. After several days of recuperation, Wang Gulu and the others had more or less fully recovered from their injuries. Unfortunately, no matter how hard they tried, they still couldn't establish contact with the fleet. "Iya, how long will it take to leave this area?" Wang Gulu asked. Lu Yi replied, "According to the mark on the star map, it will take about 20 days. Wang Gulu and the others relaxed. 20 days wasn't too long. After being swept into the galactic magnetic storm, the 3 of them were traumatized by this area. They just wanted to leave as soon as possible. Until now, the 3 of them still didn't know how Lu Yi had saved them. It was simply impossible to save someone under such circumstances. They prayed in their hearts that they wouldn't encounter another galactic magnetic storm. They were traveling alone now, and it wasn't as convenient as the fleet. There was also no one to patrol and warn them. If they encountered another galactic magnetic storm, they might suffer again if they couldn't find a place to hide in time. Fortunately, they didn't encounter any accidents along the way. A few days later, while Lu Yi was driving the starboat, he heard the star constellation called Zhou Xingji from the Green Dawn Dao realm exclaim, "What's that?" Everyone on the ship felt their hearts skip a beat. It was not a good sign to discover something abnormal in this place. They quickly looked in the direction he was pointing and saw that there was a stream of light in that direction. It was like a ribbon that stretched across the starry sky. The ribbon was slowly spreading in one direction, as if it had a life of its own. The end of the ribbon was slowly dissipating. But because the front was still spreading, the ribbon maintained a very long span. Lu Yi used his eyesight to see clearly what was at the front of the ribbon. It was a huge butterfly. The butterfly was multicolored and extremely beautiful. At a glance, it looked like the most exquisite piece of art. With a gentle flap of its wings, it could travel tens of thousands of kilometers. The ribbons visible to the naked eye were actually the dust that scattered when it flapped its wings. A star beast. Another cultivator from the Jade Conch realm called Tao Yin also saw the butterfly and couldn't help but exclaim, "Brother Tao, do you know what kind of star beast this is?" Lu Yi asked. Tao Yin shook his head and said, "I haven't seen it before." It was not surprising. There were all kinds of star beasts in the starry sky, not to mention Tao Yin, who was just a star constellation. Even Ri dared not say that he was omniscient. Zhou Xingji also said that he didn't know what the star beast was. Needless to say, Wang Guliu was the least knowledgeable one in the starry sky. The butterfly star beast was 1,000,000 kilometers away, so the few of them were observing and commenting on it. However, after observing for a while, Lu Yi suddenly realized that something was wrong. "Brother Lu, is this star beast coming for us?" Tao Yan's expression became panicked. Zhou Xingji and Wang Guliu's expressions also changed greatly. Because while they were watching, the butterfly star beast suddenly changed its direction and was rushing toward them. As the butterfly flapped its wings, the distance between them quickly shortened, and the ribbon across the starry sky floated over. The expressions of the people on the star boat became colorful. They felt that this journey was really full of disasters. A few days ago, they were hit by the stellar magnetic storm, and today they encountered a strange star beast. All kinds of thoughts flashed through Lu Ye's mind, but in the end, he gave up the idea of escaping. Although he didn't know what cultivation this star beast had, he knew from its speed that even if he drove the star boat as fast as he could, he wouldn't be able to outrun it. If this star beast didn't have any evil intentions, then it would be fine. But if it did, then they could only wash their necks clean. "Don't move and don't be nervous," Lu Yi hurriedly warned everyone. As soon as his voice fell, Tao Yan's teeth began to chatter. "Brother Lu, this is Ri. As they got closer, they could clearly see the terrifying aura of the butterfly. It was much stronger than Luan Xiaoa. It was clearly a Ri star beast. Lu Yi also stiffened. He couldn't figure out what was so special about this chaotic explosion zone that it could attract such powerful star beasts. On the way back, they had encountered the giant blue bird and hitched a ride with it. Now that they encountered this strange butterfly, they didn't know what would happen. Fortunately, although the aura of the butterfly star beast was extremely terrifying, it didn't seem to be hostile, which made Lu Yi and the others feel a little relieved. Moreover, the butterfly star beast didn't seem to be heading straight for them. Its huge body was like a sea of stars, gently gliding over the starboat not far away. It didn't seem to be interested in Lu Yi and the others at all. Colorful dust drifted down, gently imprinting itself on Lu Yi and the others. Naturally, they were wary of this strange dust. After all, no one knew what this butterfly star beast was, so no one could tell what kind of power this dust had. However, the range of this dust was too large. There was nowhere for them to hide, so they could only circulate their spiritual energy to protect themselves. Strangely, this dust didn't seem to be harmful at all. After it landed on them, it quickly melted like snowflakes. Chapter 1589. As the butterfly star beast flew away, Lu Ye's expression flickered. As the dust merged with his body, Lu Yi felt a strange resonance with the butterfly star beast that was flying further and further away. Due to this strange resonance, he felt as if he was losing control of his body. His talent tree suddenly reacted. As he looked at it, the tree suddenly burst into flames and thick black smoke rose into the air. Lu Ye's heart trembled. He knew that an external force had invaded his body and caused the talent tree to react. Could it be a deadly poison? If so, with the talent tree, he might be able to escape this disaster. But Wang Gulu, Tao Yin, and Zhou Xingji would most likely die. While urging the talent tree's power with all its might, he looked at Wang Gulu and the others. At this moment, the three of them began to panic. Wang Gulu cried out in alarm. "That dust is poisonous." As he spoke, he suddenly stood up. However, his movements were extremely stiff. It was as if there was an invisible string that had locked his body and controlled his movements, turning him into a puppet that was being manipulated. Wang Gulu's expression was clearly one of panic, but under Lu Ye's gaze, he spread his arms and began to move up and down like a butterfly flapping its wings. As he moved, he walked back and forth on the star boat. At first glance, it looked as if he was performing some strange ceremony. His panic turned into astonishment. What's going on? Wang Gulu was extremely puzzled. He didn't want to do these movements at all, but he couldn't control his body at all. Not only him, but Tao Yin and Zhou Xingji were also moving their arms up and down. Their expressions were clearly uneasy, but they were still making strange movements. The three of them slowly formed a circle, with Lu Yi in the middle, and kept spinning around. The corners of Lu Ye's eyes twitched when he saw this. 3-star mansions from different realms were showing off their beauty in front of him like ducks seeking a mate. This scene was really a bit unsightly. "I want to sing." Tao Yin was on the verge of tears. Rather than saying this sentence, it was better to say that he was singing it. His tone was very charming. "Me too." Zhou Xingji expressed that he was about to lose control of the desire in his heart, and had to sing a few lines. Why are you fine?" Wang Gulu asked in a strange tone. At this moment, Lu Yi was observing the butterfly star beast in the distance. He discovered that every time the butterfly flapped its wings, Wang Gulu and the other two would move their arms. He was certain that their strange movements were influenced by the butterfly. Lu Yi couldn't help but shudder when he thought about the resonance between him and the butterfly star beast. Fortunately, he had the talent tree. Otherwise, he might have ended up like Wang Gulu and the others, singing and dancing. What kind of star beast was this? Although it didn't have any malicious intent towards them, and the dust didn't cause them any substantial harm, it was able to turn those who came into contact with it into puppets. The power of the dust was indeed very strange. "Do you feel anything unusual?" Lu Yi asked. "Nope," Tao Yin replied. Wang Gulu also sang along. "Very good. I suddenly feel very energetic." Zhou Xingji continued to sing. "And there's even a kind of joy in my heart that can't be vented." He clearly had an irrepressible smile on his face, but when he laughed, it was as if he was crying. The three of them sang one after another, and their singing was quite interesting. Lu Yi quietly observed them. Although he should be able to use the talent tree to help them solve their current problem, since the three of them didn't feel anything, he wasn't in a hurry to make a move. This was the first time he had encountered such a strange star beast, and Lu Yi wanted to observe it more. He wanted to see how long the effect of the dust would last. Or perhaps, once they were far enough away from the butterfly star beast, they wouldn't be affected anymore? The star boat became lively. Lu Yi steered the star boat forward, and the three men behind him sang and danced, as if they were celebrating some kind of festival. The strange song spread into the depths of the starry sky as the star boat sailed. Half a day later, Lu Yi was certain that the butterfly star beast was very far away from them. However, the situation of Wang Gulu and the other two hadn't improved in the slightest. They were still singing and dancing. After waiting for another half a day, there was still no relief. Although the three of them didn't show any other abnormalities, Lu Yi couldn't be bothered to observe them any longer. Just as he was about to give them a hand, the three men who were singing and dancing suddenly stopped and sat down on the star boat. "Have they recovered?" Lu Yi asked. Wang Gulu and the other two looked at each other and nodded with lingering fear. This saved Lu Yi a lot of trouble. If Lu Yi wanted to help them, he would have to inject his spiritual energy into their bodies. Only then could he borrow the power of the talent tree to burn them. This would more or less affect their bodies, and they might suffer some internal injuries. "Then, you three should rest first," Lu Yi said. They weren't far from the Thousand Hills grave. Once they left the chaotic explosion zone and arrived at the Thousand Hills grave, the rest of the journey would be much easier. Wang Gulu and the other two hurriedly called out to him. Lu Yi looked at the three of them in confusion, only to see them stammering. In the end, It was Wangulu who spoke first. What happened before? Lu Yi looked at them blankly. What happened before? Wangulu was stunned, but Tao Yan's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly said, No, nothing happened earlier. Zhou Xingji nodded his head like a chick pecking rice. The journey was peaceful, and the starry sky was beautiful. How could anything have happened? Lu Yi turned around and continued steering the star boat. Wangulu and the other two exchanged a glance, and they all saw the confusion on each other's faces. This matter was related to their reputation, and they definitely couldn't leak it. If the other cultivators in this realm learned about it, they would definitely be laughed at for the rest of their lives. After traveling for another half a month, they finally left the chaotic explosion zone. Wangulu and the others looked at the magnificent starry sky in front of them, and they all fell into a daze. Lu Yi had seen a few starry sky wonders before, so he was more knowledgeable than them. Thus, he remained calm and collected. He steered the star boat around for a while, but he didn't see any fleet from the three realms. He also didn't receive any reply from his transmission talisman. He could only wait. According to his calculations, the fleet couldn't stay in the chaotic explosion zone for too long, and they would definitely come out. As long as they came out, they would definitely follow the path on the star chart and arrive in the vicinity. At that time, he would be able to contact them. However, the fleet's speed was ultimately slower than his, so it was normal for him to be one step ahead. Wangulu and the other two were already discussing whether there was something buried in the nebula burial mounds. Wangulu speculated that there were definitely the corpses of powerhouses buried inside, while Zhou Xingji guessed that there were treasures inside. Tao Yin felt that the two of them were wrong, but he couldn't say why. Lu Yi didn't interrupt. He knew what was inside the nebula burial mounds, and those things were extremely beneficial to the improvement of a realm's foundation. If one day, Little Nine could move 9 provinces to this place, and then devour the things inside the nebula burial mounds to its heart's content, then 9 provinces' promotion to a top-grade realm would be just around the corner. However, although the nebula burial mounds were inanimate objects, they had an instinctive defensive ability. Before the defense of the nebula burial mounds was resolved, even if Little Nine moved 9 provinces here, it would be useless. Lu Yi looked around, wanting to see if he could find the blue bird, or the burial mounds dug up by the blue bird. Unfortunately, as far as the eye could see, the burial mounds were all intact, and the blue bird was nowhere to be seen, so he could only give up on this idea. After waiting for a few more days, the musical note suddenly moved. Lu Yi checked, and found that it was a message from Yi. Soon he received a message from Wuxia. He was overjoyed, knowing that things were as he had guessed. After the fleet couldn't find them in the chaotic explosion zone, they chose to continue on their way. At this moment, the fleet should have left the chaotic explosion zone, and not far away. Otherwise, the musical note wouldn't have been able to contact them. Lu Yi wasn't the only one who contacted them. Wangulu, Tao Yin, and Zhou Xingji also sent people to contact them. After a while, they saw a fleet slowly sailing in the direction they came from. On the leading star ship, Luan Xiao's figure could be vaguely seen. There were also many people standing at the bow of the ship and waving at them. Soon they met up with each other. Seeing that Lu Yi had actually rescued Wangulu and the others, Luan Xiao had a look of disbelief. She had seen the situation at that time, although she didn't know why Lu Yi had the confidence to break into the stellar magnetic storm. Even if he had the confidence, it would at most be to protect himself. Rescuing people in that kind of environment was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. But now Wangulu and the others were with Lu Yi. This ability was really amazing. Fellow Taoist Luan. Lu Yi stepped forward and bowed. Luan Xiao said, After you left, the fleet searched for you for a few days, but they couldn't find any clues. I made the decision to let the fleet continue on, because I thought that if you were safe, you would continue on. The intersection between the chaotic explosion zone and the Thousand Hills tomb is the safest place to meet up. Lu Yi nodded. Fellow Taoist's decision is very wise. Luan Xiao glanced at Tao Yin behind Lu Yi. I still have to thank fellow Taoist for helping me. It's within my ability. I can't just stand by and watch. Luan Xiao said. Now that we're out of the chaotic explosion zone, I'd like to rest here for 2 days before setting off again. What do you think, fellow Taoist? Although the fleet mostly relied on the power of spirit jades, the cultivators also needed to use their spiritual energy to maintain some formations. However, there were enough cultivators on each spirit ship, so they could take turns, so it wasn't too tiring. There was no danger of the chaotic explosion zone here, and the journey ahead was long. Resting for 2 days before setting off again would allow everyone to be more energetic. Fellow Taoist is the person in charge of the 3 realms. Just give the order. Seeing that he didn't have any objections, Luan Xiao immediately gave the order. Chapter 1590. The fleet rested at the edge of the Thousand-Mound Grave for 2 days before continuing their journey. Although the Thousand-Mound Grave covered a large area, it wouldn't take too long to pass through. Lu Yi had taken less than a month to get there, and if the fleet was slower, a month would be more than enough. Passing through the Thousand-Mound Grave was the beginning of the test. Lu Yi remembered that when he left the Indefinite Galaxy had decided to prepare for a war against the Hive. A few years had passed since then, and he did not know how the situation was. The best-case scenario was that the 4 galaxies had already worked together to eliminate the Hive. Then, they would not encounter any danger. However, no one could predict the exact direction of a war. If the war was ongoing, the 3 realms fleet would be in a war zone. Moreover, it would be a war zone with more than one sunshine expert. This was very likely to happen, although a few years was not a short period of time. The 4 galaxies working together could not be accomplished overnight. Each galaxy would need to deploy their troops. Just this alone would take a lot of time. Then, they would need to meet with the Indefinite Galaxy before they could start the war against the Hive. On the planetary ship, Lu Yi explained the situation to Luan Xiao. Luan Xiao looked at him. You have never mentioned this before. Lu Yi said, it's useless to mention it in the past. We haven't reached this point yet, so it's only adding to our troubles. But now that we're here, we have to face the possible problems. Besides, even if I did mention it in advance, would the Jade Conch domain have given up on entering the Wanxiang Sea? Luan Xiao remained silent. She knew that Lu Yi was right. Even if Lu Yi had told them about the situation here, the Jade Conch domain would not have given up on entering the Wanxiang Sea. After a long while, Luan Xiao asked, how far do you think the war has progressed? Lu Yi shook his head. It's hard to predict. We have to see it with our own eyes. However, the 4 galaxies all have sunshine experts. They are also very interested in the Wanxiang Sea. When the time comes, they will follow us. That's why they decided to work together to eliminate the Hive. I have seen the Hive from afar. It is not small. I heard that there are 2 sunshine experts guarding it. However, the 4 galaxies also have sunshine experts. If we work together, it will not be difficult to eliminate the Hive. It is only a matter of time. Luan Xiao said. It seems that we still need to get in touch with the 4 cardinal star system. Since fellow Taoist has made contact with them before, how about I leave this matter to you? Lu Yi replied, it's my duty. When the time comes, the fleet can find a suitable place to hide. I'll go ahead and see if I can get in touch with the Pyron. It won't be too late for the fleet to move after confirming the situation in the war zone. The matter was settled for now. As for what to do when the time came, they could only take it one step at a time. Luan Xiao was quite concerned about the indefinite star system. From what she knew, the indefinite star system was the closest star system to the Jade Conch. As long as they passed through the Thousand-Mound Grave and the chaotic explosion zone, they would cross paths. The reason why they didn't cross paths in the past was probably because of the barrier of the chaotic explosion zone. Now the chaotic explosion zone was still there, but it wasn't as dangerous as before. Therefore, in the future, cultivators from the 2 galaxies might cross paths. As the leader of Jade Conch Galaxy, Luan Xiao felt it was her responsibility to take this opportunity to improve her relationship with Apeiron. After all, Apeiron had sunshine, which was what Jade Conch wanted. The fleet continued to sail. Suddenly everyone sensed something strange. On the planetary ships, Figures gathered and looked into the depths of the thousand-mound grave. On Jade Kong's planetary ship, Lu Yi and Wan Xiao stood side by side. Wan Xiao's expression was grave. She had already ordered the fleet to stop. This was because there were violent fluctuations of a battle coming from ahead. As far as the eye could see, there were colorful lights blooming from time to time. Is this a battle between Sunshine and Apiron? Lu Yi asked uncertainly. They were too far away, so he could only vaguely sense it. However, Wan Xiao's cultivation was much higher than his, so she should be able to sense it more clearly. Wan Xiao nodded. To Sunshine. However, from the energy fluctuations, it doesn't seem to be a battle between cultivators. It's more like a battle between star beasts. He felt that the colorful lights that occasionally bloomed were very familiar. Now that he thought about it, could it be the butterfly star beast they had encountered earlier? As for the other side, could it be the bluebird? If it was those two fellows, then it made sense why they were fighting so fiercely. Moreover, the butterfly star beast had indeed been flying toward the thousand-mound grave earlier. The blue bird was very interested in the things in the nebula grave. Moreover, star beasts like wild beasts had their own territories. If the butterfly star beast had rashly entered the blue bird's territory, there would definitely be a conflict. The fleet could not withstand the aftermath of such a battle. Wan Xiao's order to stop was undoubtedly a wise decision. At this moment, she stood at the bow of the ship and looked into the distance. Her eyes were filled with yearning. In terms of cultivation, she had already reached Yu Yao's limit. However, she was still unable to break through the shackles and see through the secrets of Sunshine. This time, she was leading the fleet to the 10,000-mound sea in hopes of finding an opportunity. Otherwise, Jade Kong and Yu Yao would have been enough. They would have sent a mid-stage Yu Yao instead of her. Lu Yi looked into the distance. He wanted to sense who was stronger and who was weaker. However, no matter how he tried, he could not figure it out. However, from the bottom of his heart, he hoped that the blue bird would win. After all, he owed the blue bird a debt of gratitude. If there was a chance in the future, he might even be able to hitch a ride. The butterfly star beast was different. The dust that it scattered when it flapped its wings was very strange. If it weren't for Lu Ye's innate skill tree, he would have definitely made a fool of himself like Wan Gulu and the others. No one knew when this battle had started. The fleet only felt the aftermath of the battle when they arrived, so they had no idea how long it would last. The fleet waited here for more than 10 days, but the battle still did not seem to be over. It seemed like it would continue for a long time. Wan Xiao knew that they could not continue waiting like this. The battle between the Sunshine Star Beasts might not end even after waiting for several years. The fleet could not afford to waste so much time here. After discussing it with Lu Yi, they decided to take a small detour. Although this would take a bit more time, it was better than waiting aimlessly. The fleet continued to set sail, gradually leaving the area covered by the aftermath of the battle. A simple detour took nearly a month. They had originally planned to leave the 1,000-mound grave in a month, but in the end, it took them 2 months. Just as the fleet was about to leave the range of the 1,000-mound grave, a powerful aura suddenly approached them from behind. Lu Yi, who was cultivating in his cabin, felt his heart skip a beat. He quickly went to the deck and looked back, only to see a colorful streak of light rapidly approaching them from behind. The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. He felt that this trip to the 10,000 elephant sea was really unlucky. He had seen the strange dust that the butterfly star beast scattered. Therefore, when he saw that the butterfly star beast was heading in the same direction as the fleet, he immediately warned them. At the same time, he sent a voice transmission to Wan Xiao, asking her to change the course of the ship. They had to avoid the star beast no matter what. Wan Xiao also knew that the situation was not good. Even if she did not know the background of the butterfly star beast, with Sunshine chasing after them, anyone would feel scared. She immediately followed Lu Ye's advice and steered the ship to the side. The ships and starships behind them hurriedly followed. A short while later, the butterfly star beast flew past the fleet of starships. The cultivators of the 3 realms on the starships were all staring at it with nervous expressions on their faces. However, what made them feel slightly relieved was that the star beast did not even look at them. as if they were nothing. It just flew past them, leaving the colorful streak of light behind it. Lu Yi clearly saw that the butterfly star beast had many terrifying wounds on its body. Even its wings seemed to be a little tattered. It was obvious that it had suffered a loss in the previous battle. If it was the blue bird that he had seen before, he wondered how the blue bird was doing. However, looking at the butterfly star beast's posture, it should have been defeated, which was why it left the 1,000-mound grave. Thinking about it this way, the blue bird was indeed stronger. Old Wan, why is your face so pale? On a starship in the land of the 9 provinces, Gan Wudong looked curiously at Wan Guliu, who was standing beside him. They both worked in Haotian City in the War Province. One was the head of the law department, while the other was the head of the official department. They met frequently, so they were naturally familiar with each other. Beside Gan Wudong, Fan Xiangyi also looked at him with concern. Are you okay? Wan Guliu shivered and said stubbornly, I'm fine. I just caught a cold. I'll go back and rest for a while. After saying that, he quickly slipped back into the cabin. Gan Wudong and Fan Xiangyi were left confused. He was already a member of the 9 provinces. How could he catch a cold? Wasn't this nonsense? However, since Wan Guliu was unwilling to say, they could not force him. They only secretly paid more attention to him in the next few days. Wan Guliu of the land of the 9 provinces was not the only one who caught a cold. Zhou Xingji of the Qingli Taoist world and Tao Yin of the Yushui Taoist world also caught a cold. The 3 of them had almost forgotten about that terrible experience. Who would have thought that the butterfly star beast would appear in front of them again? Fortunately, Lu Yi warned them early this time, and Luan Xiao's decision was fast enough. The entire fleet avoided the area covered by the streak of light. Otherwise, the scene of the entire fleet and 509 provinces singing and dancing together was unimaginable. The fleet successfully left the 1,000-mound grave and entered another part of the starry sky. This was not the indefinite galaxy. It was just a nameless region. Looking at the starry sky, there were many such regions. They were basically barren star regions with no value. For tens of thousands of years, except for star beasts, very few cultivators had set foot in this place. However, when Lu Yi passed through this place, this was the territory of the insect race. The insect race's nest was right in front of them, almost at the border of the indefinite galaxy. Chapter 1591. In the barren star field between the Thousand Hills Tomb and the indefinite star field, Lu Yi moved forward in a lone boat. He was neither fast nor slow. He took the lead, and the fleet followed him from afar within the range of the musical notes communication range. Because they couldn't determine the situation ahead, the fleet couldn't rush in rashly. It would be bad if the battle here was in full swing, and the fleet was involved. Lu Yi was in the vanguard alone. If there were any abnormalities, he could send a message back in time, and the fleet could respond in time. The last time he had passed by this place, he had occasionally seen active insectoids. This time, however, there was not even a shadow of an insectoid. Lu Yi wondered if the war was over, and the insectoid nest had been wiped out. Otherwise, this area wouldn't be so peaceful. Moreover, the butterfly astral beast had also flown in this direction, but Lu Yi didn't see any trace of it along the way. He didn't know where the butterfly astral beast had flown to. However, it had been injured in the Thousand Hills Tomb, and had most likely gone to find a place to recuperate. This place was desolate and uninhabited, making it the best place to recuperate. After flying forward for 2 months, Lu Yi saw the huge hive in the distance. He knew the battle here wasn't over, otherwise, the hive wouldn't still be there. Although the hive was still there were countless lights flashing around it, and there were also energy fluctuations of both strong and weak coming from there. This situation clearly showed that there were cultivators attacking the hive over there. This battle has been going on for a long time, Lu Yi thought to himself. He didn't know when the battle here started, but it still hadn't ended. Since the hive was being attacked, there must be cultivators from the indefinite star field, or the other 3 galaxies. Lu Yi sent a message to the fleet behind him, telling them to temporarily lie low and wait while he went up to check out the situation. Luan Xiao quickly replied, telling him to be careful. Continuing forward, Lu Yi blessed himself with concealment and aura-concealing spirit runes, and quietly approached the battlefield. When he got closer, he slowly saw the specific situation over there, and couldn't help but be shocked. It was because there were warships gathered around the enormous insect nest. These warships were undoubtedly large warships. They were so large that they were not something a small warship like the tiger shark could compare to. There were about 200 of these large battleships, and their styles were quite different. However, considering that these battleships were jointly formed by the 4 galaxies, the difference in style was understandable. After all, they didn't come from the same family. Next to the large starships were a number of small and medium-sized starships, and the various lights Lu Yi had seen in the distance had come from these starships. From afar, one could only see flashes of light. Up close, one could feel the terrifying might of the attacks. Every attack from the large battleship was no weaker than an all-out attack from Yu Yao. Among all the warships, the warship that faced the hive was the largest. The other warships were not small, but they paled in comparison to the hive. However, the size of this warship was comparable to the hive. Just like that, the 2 colossi stood in confrontation in the starry sky for an unknown period of time. When Lu Yi saw this, he knew that the 4-way system was launching an all-out attack on the insectoid nest. Although their attacks were fierce, it didn't seem like they would be able to do anything to the insectoid nest in a short amount of time. The insectoid hive was not just a place to nurture their clansmen. It was a war fortress with both offense and defense. At this very moment, Ping Song Luo Tuoxing Luo Hong Xiaoshan Luo Mu and I Ho 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 Mu. Neither were no signs of any insectoids though. Lu Yi guessed that the insectoids were hiding in their nests. Under such a ferocious onslaught, the insectoids would not dare to show themselves. Since this was the case, there was no need for Lu Yi to hide. He removed the spiritual tattoos on his body and revealed himself, heading straight for the largest battleship. Before he could get close, he was discovered by a large battleship nearby. Soon, a figure flew out of the battleship and blocked Lu Yi's path from afar. The figure shouted, "Who goes there?" The main reason was that Lu Yi's position was not right. The cultivators of the 4-way system would only come from the indefinite star system, but Lu Yi came from the Thousand Hills tomb. Therefore, it was obvious that he was not from the 4-way system. At this critical juncture of the war, the 4-way system's defenses were naturally strong. However, Lu Yi's cultivation was not high. He was only a star constellation cultivator. Therefore, although they noticed him, only Yu Yao came out. Lu Yi stopped and looked over. He realized that he did not know this Yu Yao. Aside from the few Yu Yao from the indefinite realm, the only other Yu Yao he knew was from the exalted realm. It was normal that he did not know her. He cupped his hands and said, "Lu Yi of the 9 heavens greets you, fellow Taoist." Yu Yao was stunned. Then she asked in surprise, "You're Lu Yi of the 9 heavens?" He obviously knew who Lu Yi was. This was normal. The reason the 4-way system had been able to reach an agreement so quickly to eliminate the insectoid nest was because everyone wanted to follow Lu Yi to the Wanxiang Sea. However, if they wanted Lu Yi to return safely, they had to eliminate this insectoid nest first. Otherwise, with the insectoids entrenched here, it would not be safe for Lu Yi to return. If Lu Yi was captured and killed by the insectoids, they would have no way to return to the Wanxiang Sea. Otherwise, even though the other 3 systems knew that they would be intimately interdependent, they would still have to make the indefinite star system bleed before agreeing to join forces. After all, the insectoid nest was located at the indefinite star system's doorstep, not theirs. It was inevitable that the 4-way system would join forces to eliminate the insectoid nest. It was also destined to happen. However, Lu Yi's arrival and the allure of the Wanxiang Sea had pushed this outcome forward, reducing the resistance of the 4-way system. Moreover, only by eliminating this insectoid nest would everyone have the time to think about the Wanxiang Sea. Otherwise, no one would be in the mood to send anyone to the Wanxiang Sea. That's right. Good timing. Yu Yao was overjoyed. Senior brother Rizhao has been waiting for you for a long time. Come with me. As he said this, he channeled his magic power and wrapped it around Lu Yi. They flew towards the super-large warship. Yu Yao and Lu Yi chatted casually along the way. Lu Yi mainly asked about the current situation. From Yu Yao's words, Lu Yi learned that the war had indeed reached a critical juncture. This war had actually begun more than half a year after Lu Yi left. However, the four-way system needed time to mobilize their forces. Moreover, it would not have taken much effort if they had simply wanted to chase the insectoid nest away. However, the powerhouses of the four-way system didn't just want to chase the insectoid nest away. If they did, the insectoid nest could come back again. Therefore, the powerhouses of the four-way system wanted to completely eliminate the insectoid nest. Once they had gathered enough manpower, they would make various arrangements to gradually chip away at the insectoid forces on the periphery. Then, they would gradually form an encirclement around the insectoid nest. This was why it had taken so long. Lu Yi was somewhat puzzled as he looked at the gigantic insectoid nest in the starry sky. Insectoid nests are said to be the insectoid race's war fortresses. They can float around in the starry sky. Based on the defensive strength of this insectoid nest, if it sensed that something was wrong and wanted to escape, we shouldn't be able to stop it, right? Although the four-way system had dispatched many warships and formed an encirclement, if such a gigantic insectoid nest really wanted to break out of the encirclement, those large warships alone would not be able to stop it. Yu Yao laughed. This is all thanks to senior brother Rizhao's foresight. Before the encirclement was completed, a few senior brothers forced their way into the insectoid nest and destroyed some of its cores. Therefore, although the insectoid nest can move, it's very slow. Because it was slow, even if it managed to break out of the encirclement, it would be pointless. It would only be pursued by the warships from the four-way system. Moreover, moving such a gigantic insectoid nest consumed a lot of energy. Rather than wasting energy to move, it was better to focus it on defense. Lu Yi's heart surged as he listened. Such a gigantic insectoid nest must have countless experts inside. Moreover, it was said that there were 2 Rizhao insectoids guarding it. Yet, several Rizhao had actually worked together to force their way in. In the end, it seemed that they had achieved their goal. It was hard to imagine how they had accomplished such a difficult task. Then, can the insectoids only wait for death now? Lu Yi asked. Yu Yao nodded. Indeed, once we break through its defenses, exterminating this insectoid army will be as easy as snapping a finger. This was the confidence of a large realm with a strong foundation. If it were the 9 provinces that were targeted by such an insectoid nest, they would be the ones waiting for death. After a pause, he sighed softly. It's a pity that senior brother Chun Zong of Beixian was injured in the previous battle. I wonder how he's doing now. I'll go take a look. From his words, it was clear that he was also from the Beixian galaxy. As the two spoke, they arrived at the gigantic battleship. Inside, they could feel the grandeur of the battleship. This was definitely the work of a realm's top experts. It should have come from a Pyron. However, even with a Pyron's foundation, she probably wouldn't have a second battleship like this. If it weren't for the insectoid nest, she wouldn't have sent such a battleship. When the 9 provinces could reach a Pyron's level, they would barely be able to establish themselves in space and deal with most of the dangers that came from space. As for now, it was still too early. Yu Yao of Beixian led Lu Yi straight to the center. Soon they arrived at a spacious hall. At this moment, there were many cultivators gathered in the hall. Many of them were busy working on the complicated formations. Constantly, there were reports coming from all directions, allowing the experts here to have a clearer understanding of the situation on the battlefield. As soon as Lu Yi entered, he felt several gazes on him. He turned to look, and found that most of the faces were unfamiliar. Only one valiant woman he recognized was a Pyron Rizhao, whom he had met last time. Chapter 1592. Brother Lu is here. Lu Yi looked toward the source of the laughter, and saw someone he recognized. He quickly cupped his fists. Brother Kong. It was Kong Chung of Indefinite. His arm had been destroyed by Ye's punch, but he had a good temperament. He acted as if nothing had happened, and he even took the initiative to befriend Lu Yi. I've been wondering when you'd come back. I didn't expect you to come back so soon. Kong Qing seemed to be in a good mood. When Lu Yi left indefinite, he didn't know when he'd come back. Traveling through space would take a long time, so indefinite had been prepared to wait. Who knew Lu Yi would come back so soon? Fortunately, everything went smoothly. There were no delays, Lu Yi replied. Kong Qing said enthusiastically, Come. Let me introduce you to a few senior brothers Rizhao. As he spoke, he pointed at the woman Lu Yi had met before. This is senior sister Li Guan from Apeiron. You've met her before. Lu Yi only learned her name now. Although they'd met before, they hadn't had much to talk about. He'd only asked her about the insectoids before continuing on his journey. Lu Yi quickly bowed, and Li Guan nodded. Kong Qing then pointed at a cold-looking man next to Li Guan. This is senior brother Ningbu Ao from Indefinite. Among the 3 Rizhao of Indefinite, there were only Li Guan and Ningbu Ao besides Jiang Shang. Now that Jiang Shang was overseeing the region, Li Guan and Ningbu Ao were both here. Next, Lu Yi met Wuxia from the Daluo Galaxy, Bai Jin from the Quiet Moon Galaxy, and Chen Zong from the Beixian Galaxy. They all bowed respectfully. Rizhao was one of the top cultivators in this part of the universe. No matter where you looked, he was worthy of respect. Wuxia of the Daluo Galaxy was much more amiable than the other Rizhao masters. He smiled and said a few words to Lu Yi. When he mentioned Luo Shenxi, Lu Yi guessed that Wuxia must have heard some of Luo Shenxi's words, which was why he looked at him differently. Of course, it was also because of the Wanxiang Sea. Right now, Lu Yi was a key figure in entering the Wanxiang Sea. Even if his cultivation was far below theirs, they still did their best to treat him with respect. Chen Zong from Beixian was indeed injured, probably from when he barged into the insect nest. His face was a little pale, and there was a faint smell of blood on him. The essence, qi, and spirit of a sunshine cultivator had been refined to the extreme. Ordinary injuries could be easily healed. Chen Zong's injuries didn't seem to be simple. Who knew if it would affect his ability? Quiet Moon Galaxy's Bai Jin was also very kind to Lu Yi. However, whenever Lu Yi faced Ri, he always had a strange feeling, but he couldn't tell what it was. From the looks of it, the 4 galaxies had sent out a total of 5 Nichokas. Aside from Apeiron, who had 2, the other 3 galaxies had sent out 1 each. With such a powerful lineup and a decent fleet of warships, it was more than enough to deal with an insectoid nest. After all, according to the information they had, there were only 2 sunshine insectoids in the hive. 5 against 2. There was no way they would lose. Fellow Taoist Lu, did you come here alone? Kong Qing asked. The reason why he asked this was because he remembered that Lu Yi said that he would bring some people out from the 9 skies. But now that he only saw Lu Yi, he was a little confused. Lu Yi replied, There's a fleet from the mainland following us. Because I'm not sure about the situation here, I went ahead to scout ahead. The fleet is lying in ambush behind us. Lu Yi nodded and took out a sound talisman to send a message to Wan Xiaoa, informing her of the situation. Wan Xiaoa immediately agreed and rushed over with the fleet. Lu Yi waited in the central hall. During this time, several Rizhao asked him some questions, and Lu Yi told them everything he knew. Under normal circumstances, a constellation like him wouldn't have the qualifications to talk to Rizhao face to face. It was only because 4-Way Galaxy needed his help that he had such an opportunity. Half a day later, Wan Xiaoa sent a message to him, informing him that the fleet had arrived near the battlefield. Lu Yi ended the conversation with the Rizhao, excused himself, and left the central hall. Flying out of the super-large warship, Lu Yi flew towards the fleet. After meeting up with each other, he saw that everyone on the fleet was standing on one side of the ship, dazzled by the huge battle over there. The cultivators of the 3 realms had never seen such a scene before. Not to mention the cultivators of the 9 continents. Even the cultivators of the Jade Conch continent had never seen such a scene. Feeling the intensity of the battle here, they were all shaken, especially the super-large warship, which was even more amazing. Although they are all large realms, the difference between them and Rizhao is still too big. Wan Xiao sighed with emotion. Lu Yi smiled and said, Fellow Taoist, don't think too much. The fleet here is jointly formed by the 4 galaxies. It doesn't belong to any one galaxy. Luan Xiao knew that he was comforting her. She shook her head and said, "But each of them should have the ability to form such a fleet." "That's true." Luan Xiao gathered her thoughts and asked, "What's the situation here? The hive doesn't seem to be able to fight back." Lu Yi told her everything he knew in detail, then said, "The hive is destined to be destroyed. Once the hive's defenses are broken, the 4 galaxies' allied forces will be able to achieve victory in one fell swoop. Apeiron wants us to go ahead and wait in the unbounded realm. Once the battle here is over, they will follow us to the Wanxiang Sea." Luan Xiao was stunned. "All these warships are going?" Lu Yi shook his head. "I don't know, but since they came to the unbounded realm, they should follow us." Luan Xiao was speechless. When news of the Wanxiang Sea reached Jade Conch Continent, they finally decided to send her along with 100 people. However, compared to the 4 galaxies' extravagance, Jade Conch Continent's decision seemed too petty. Looking at it now, Jade Conch Continent seemed to have missed a great opportunity. They were obviously closer to Lu Yi, but they let outsiders bask in more glory. But now there was no point in being upset. After thinking for a moment, Luan Xiao said, "Fellow Taoist Lu, I have an idea." Lu Yi looked at her seriously. "Please speak, fellow Taoist. It's rare to come across such a grand battle. Since we've encountered it, it would be a pity to miss it. You said that the Wanxiang Sea is in chaos, and there are many conflicts. It won't be easy for us to establish ourselves in the Wanxiang Sea. Perhaps we'll have to fight against the heavens and other people. Right now, we have a chance to let the cultivators of the 3 realms experience the battle in space in advance. Moreover, it doesn't seem like we need to take too much risk. What do you think?" Lu Yi immediately understood what she meant. He hadn't thought about this before. After all, this was someone else's battle, and they were just passers-by. It didn't seem right for them to rashly interfere. Kong Qing had asked him to lead people to the unbounded realm first, because he was afraid that the battle would cause Lu Yi and his men to suffer losses. However, some things were probably useless. Luan Xiao was right. This kind of opportunity was hard to come by. Participating in such a battle, even if it was just cheering from the sidelines, would greatly broaden the horizons of the cultivators of the 3 realms. It would allow them to have a deeper understanding of the dangers in space. Of course, the most important thing was that they wouldn't need to take any risks. Now that the insectoid hive was surrounded, it was only a matter of time before its defenses were breached. Once the defenses of the insectoid hive were breached, what followed would be a one-sided massacre. That's not bad. The more Lu Yi thought about it, the more he felt that Luan Xiao's idea was feasible. He pondered for a moment, then said, "I'll go talk to someone and see if they'll allow us to participate in the battle." If they didn't allow it, then his wishful thinking wouldn't work. However, Lu Yi reckoned that the Rikshitas of the 4 realms wouldn't refuse. Even flies were meat. Although the overall strength of the 3 realms fleet wasn't that great, it still had 500 constellations and 1 late-stage Yuyao. Lu Yi soon returned to the central hall of the super-large warship. He found Kong Cheng and told him about it. The reason why he didn't talk to Kong Cheng and not the Rikshitas was because Kong Cheng was in charge of the battle. The Rikshitas were only in charge of the final battle. Kong Cheng smiled and said, "It's a good thing that the cultivators of your galaxy want to help us. The 4 realms fleet is very grateful." He pondered for a moment, then said, "How about this? I see that your galaxy has 16 planetary ships. Let's divide them according to your original planetary ships and send them to each warship. What do you think, fellow Taoist?" Planetary ships couldn't play a role in such a battle. Only warships could. Therefore, if the Jade Conch cultivators wanted to participate in the battle, they would have to enter the enemy's warships. What they could do was very simple. They just had to pour their spiritual energy into the formations and provide energy for the various attacks of the warships. This way, they could save on the consumption of spiritual jades to a certain extent. Otherwise, the indefinite galaxy wouldn't be able to withstand the attacks of the warships alone. The power provided by the 500 lunar mansions could at least save a lot of spiritual jades for the 4 realms. This was why Kong Qing didn't refuse. Fellow Taoist Kong, you can make the arrangements. Since the cultivators of the Jade Conch Galaxy have decided to participate in the battle, we are a part of it. We will obey your orders, Lu Yi declared. The Rakshitas beside him nodded slightly. They had heard about Lu Yi before. They were afraid that Lu Yi would think that he could take them to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Now it seemed that this young man was quite a good person. Also, your galaxy has 5 tiger shark warships. I will send some people to deliver some spiritual jades. Let's ask those 5 warships to provide mobile support. Lu Yi naturally had no objections to this arrangement. Kong Qing summoned Indefinite Yu Yao and had her take Lu Yi to make the arrangements. After a short while, Lu Yi brought Indefinite Yu Yao to the fleet. Lu Yi explained Kong Qing's arrangements. Luan Xiao said that there was no problem, and the fleet followed Indefinite Yu Yao to the battlefield. The cultivators of the 3 realms had undoubtedly been informed by Luan Xiao in advance. At this moment they were all excited. Everything else aside, they could at least enter a large warship to broaden their horizons. Chapter 1593. When the fleet set off for the battlefield, Lu Yi returned to the planetary ship of the 9 states. He found Lan Qiyu and warned her, remember, don't use the blood race's secret technique. Just pretend to be a human who cultivates the secret technique of the blood Tao. Ordinary members of the blood race couldn't disguise themselves as humans because just their appearance was different. However, Lan Qiyu was different from ordinary members of the blood race. She was originally a human, but after accidentally refining a drop of sacred blood, she transformed into a member of the blood race. Before becoming a constellation, she had always looked like a member of the blood race. However, after becoming a constellation, her body seemed to have undergone some miraculous changes, allowing her to transform into her original human appearance. If not for this, Lu Yi wouldn't have dared to bring Lan Qiyu on this trip to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. After all, members of the blood race and the insect race didn't have a good reputation in the universe. They were practically hated by everyone. Therefore, even in a place as vast as the 10,000 Elephant Sea, cultivators from these 2 races were rarely seen. At the very least, Lu Yi had never seen the Blood Clan and the Insect Clan outside of the Constellation Hall's auction for the past few years in the Myriad Phenomenon Sea. However, it was said that some members of the blood race cultivated a unique secret technique that allowed them to conceal their blood race characteristics and disguise themselves as humans. Therefore, it wasn't necessarily true that members of the blood race were active on the 10,000 Elephant Sea. However, they all hid very well and didn't dare to expose themselves easily. Lu Yi had warned Lan Qiyu about this before they left the 9 states. If Lan Qiyu hadn't been able to conceal her blood race characteristics, Lu Yi wouldn't have dared to bring her to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Lan Qiyu nodded seriously. I'll remember it, senior brother. Soon, the fleet set off for the battlefield under Indefinite Yu Yao's leadership. According to the previous agreement, the cultivators on each planetary ship were assigned to a warship to help out. Soon, the cultivators on the 16 planetary ships of the 3 realms were assigned. The remaining 5 Tigershark warships didn't need to be bothered with them. Kong Qing had allowed them to provide mobile support, so they could do whatever they wanted. Yueyao even gave them some spirit jades. There were quite a lot of spirit jades, causing the cultivators on the Tigershark warships to beam with joy. Luan Xiao stayed on one of the warships to wait for orders. With her late-stage Yueyao cultivation, she didn't need to do the same thing as the constellations. It would be a waste of her talents. When the insectoid nest's defenses were breached, there would naturally be a time when she would need to contribute in close combat. Lu Yi was on the same warship as a group of people close to him. They weren't given any tasks and were allowed to move freely. Clearly, a Pyron Yueyao, who had brought them here, had secretly told them something, which was why he was given such special treatment. He walked around and looked around. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice. Brother Lu. Lu Yi turned around and saw that it was Su Dingyang who had called out to him. This guy didn't get along well with him before, and even brought Kong Qing to cause trouble for him. In the end, they returned empty-handed. Later, Lu Yi went to the unbounded boundary and discussed with Jiang Shang about entering the Wanxiang Sea. Coupled with Lu Ye's protection, even Kong Qingdu was polite to him, let alone Su Dingyang, who didn't even dare to show his face. It couldn't be helped because Kong Cheng had specially instructed him earlier that if he had the chance, he must resolve the conflict between him and Lu Yi, because he was a member of the group that would be heading to the Myriad Ocean as well. So it's brother Su. Lu Yi nodded and walked forward. He realized that Su Dingyang was in charge of one of the offensive formations on the warship. The formation was extremely complicated. Even with Lu Ye's knowledge of formations, he could only make out a few superficial details. Seeing Lu Ye's interest, Su Dingyang said, "If brother Lu is interested, why don't you give it a try?" Lu Yi was stunned. Really, he was indeed quite interested in these things. After all, the attacks unleashed by the large battleships were equivalent to the attacks unleashed by cultivators like Yu Yao. He was still some distance away from Yu Yao, and he couldn't unleash them on his own at the moment. Thus, it wouldn't be a bad idea to borrow the power of the spell formation to personally experience them. No problem, Su Dingyang said and stepped aside. Lu Yi stood on the warship. Su Dingyang guided him carefully from the side. Lu Yi quickly understood the trick. It was nothing more than activating the formation's power, and then activating the formation's core. Then it would launch a long-range attack on the insect hive. However, activating the formation consumed a lot of energy. He couldn't do it alone. Not only did it require a lot of spirit jades, but it also required energy from many other auxiliary formations. Most of the cultivators of the three realms did this. They provided energy to the auxiliary formations and tried their best to reduce the consumption of spirit jades. Otherwise, relying on the energy of spirit jades to activate this weapon would consume a lot of energy. Lu Yi stood in the middle of the formation and hugged the dragon-headed weapon with both hands. He poured his divine sense into it and locked onto the giant insect hive in the distance. He quietly sensed the energy accumulating in the formation and waited for a good opportunity. After a long time, Lu Yi felt that the energy was almost ready. The entire formation began to hum. Su Dingyang said, "Now's the time, brother Lu." Lu Yi hurriedly mobilized the huge amount of energy to activate the formation. Then, the dragon-headed weapon in his hands began to tremble. With a loud hum, Lu Yi felt his body shake. Then, he saw a bright beam of light shoot out from the dragon's head. It landed on the insect nest in an instant, causing ripples to spread out on the surface of the insect nest. Amazing, Lu Yi sighed. In the entire universe, there weren't many methods that could allow the constellations to use Yu Yao's power. Warships were the most common type. He could clearly feel the power of that attack. It was almost equivalent to the full power of a mid-stage Yu Yao. And this might be the result of 20 to 30 constellations working together. However, although this method could unleash Yu Yao's power, it wasn't her doing it. So, it was a little rigid. Moreover, it took a long time to charge up. This was a common flaw of warships. Therefore, warships were mostly used to attack cities. The current situation was the best time to use warships. The large warships in the unbounded realm were probably not the best. The most extreme large warships could unleash power comparable to that of a late-stage Yu Yao. Over the next half a day, Lu Yi tried to activate the formation a few more times. Only when he was satisfied did he walk out. Although activating this thing was interesting, it wasn't his power. So he didn't care much about it. The defenses of the insect hive were clearly weakening. The light screen was dimming at a rate visible to the naked eye. If this situation continued, the insect hive's defenses would be broken in half a month. There was almost no suspense in this battle. However, at a certain moment 3 days later, Lu Yi was shocked to find that the defenses of the insect hive had suddenly dissipated. He was stunned, but he quickly realized that the insectoids probably knew that they couldn't hold on any longer. They were probably going to fight to the death. After all, if this continued, they would only be waiting for death. It was better to take advantage of this opportunity to counterattack. Killing one would be enough, and killing two would be worth it. Almost at the same time that the insect hive's defenses disappeared, dark clouds floated out of the insect hive and quickly scattered in all directions. These dark clouds of various sizes were formed by the insectoids. There was no lack of Yu Yao's aura among them. Outside the encirclement, the attacks from the warships from the 4 galaxies suddenly became much fiercer. Under the attack of the colorful lights, the insect clouds were damaged, but the insect clouds seemed to be endless. They continued to float out of the insect hive. From the looks of it, the insectoids were going to move out in full force. Even on the warship, Lu Yi could feel the aura of 2 sunshine powerhouses rising from the insect hive. They were clearly the 2 sunshine powerhouses of the insectoids. At the same time, in the direction of Apiron's large warship, 5 figures shot out at almost the same time. Their auras were as powerful as the sun. Lu Yi sensed them, and immediately turned to look. He saw that they were the 5 sunshine powerhouses from the 4 galaxies. After a moment of thought, he immediately understood why these 5 were so eager to attack. The aftermath of the battle between the sunshine powerhouses was too strong. They had to keep the 2 sunshine powerhouses in the insect hive, and not let them escape. Otherwise, once the battle between the sunshine powerhouses spread out, the 4 galaxies' warships would definitely suffer losses. Limiting the battle to the insect hive was the wisest thing to do. This must have been something Ningbu Ao and the others had discussed beforehand. That was why they acted so decisively the moment the insect hive's protection disappeared. The 5 figures went against the flow of the insect clouds. Everywhere they went, there was a rain of blood. Who knew how many insectoids were killed? In a flash, the 5 of them arrived in front of the insect hive. One of them suddenly stopped, while the other 4 charged into the insect hive without slowing down. Lu Yi looked from afar, and realized that the one who stayed outside the insect hive was the female sunshine, Manager Li. She held a long sword in her hand, and the light from it was cold. She didn't stay here to watch the show. She stayed to prevent Sunshine from escaping. The 4 sunshine powerhouses entered the insect hive. As long as they dealt with 2 insectoids, it would be 2 against 1. There was no chance of failure. So it didn't matter whether she was there or not. But if the insectoid Sunshine sensed that something was wrong and wanted to escape, she could stop him from outside. The place she was in became a forbidden area. Large numbers of insectoids flew past her, but she didn't even look at them. She only used her divine will to monitor the situation inside the insect hive. Naturally, the insectoids wouldn't dare to provoke her. On the warship, Lu Yi saw this, and knew that the final battle had come. He immediately became alert. The insectoids were here. Chapter 1594. The power of a warship was quite effective when it came to sieging a city. However, if it was used in a battle like this, it was barely satisfactory. After all, the warship's attacks were all controlled by Constellation Realm cultivators, and the long time it took to accumulate power and recharge was a drawback that couldn't be erased. Thus, even with the might of a warship, the insectoids would probably arrive before they could even launch a few attacks. In a battle like this, the cultivators still had to rely on themselves. However, before the insectoid swarm approached, the warship still tried its best to eliminate the insectoids. Lu Yi frowned slightly, because something seemed to be amiss. Given the current situation, the insectoids should have gathered all their forces in one place. Breaking through the encirclement of the warships from the 4 galaxies was the right way to go. As long as they could create a gap in the encirclement of the warships from the 4 galaxies, they would be able to seize the initiative whether they continued to fight or flee. However, in reality, the insectoids that had rushed out of the hive were scattered in all directions like celestial maidens scattering flowers. As a result, the insectoids couldn't concentrate their forces. Thus, the warships in each direction didn't face much pressure. The insectoids would definitely suffer a large number of casualties. Lu Yi couldn't understand why the insectoids were doing this. One had to realize that the insectoids born from this kind of hive weren't the same as the ones he had encountered in the 9 states. Many of them were extremely intelligent, and with the hive as the center, all the insectoids could be easily commanded and obeyed orders. On the warship Lu Yi was on, a large swarm of insectoids also rushed over. Although many had been killed along the way, there was still a relatively large number of insectoids remaining. The distance between the two sides rapidly closed. At a certain moment, the cultivators, who had long since been prepared, charged out of the warship under the leadership of the Yu Yao and charged toward the insectoid swarm. Wan Xiao flew at the forefront, and the Yu Yao from the 4 galaxies were beside her. They spread out their divine senses, and soon found other insectoids in the insectoid swarm. They locked onto their targets and quickly charged toward them. Although this battle seemed chaotic, there was actually a corresponding order to it. Simply put, it was soldier against soldier, general against general. The Yu Yao would try their best to find other Yu Yao opponents. Regardless of whether they could defeat them or not, they had to at least pin them down. Relatively speaking, the cultivators were much fewer in number than the insectoids, at least 100 times more. However, the insectoids were far inferior in terms of quality. After all, the cultivators were at least constellation cultivators, but the insectoids weren't. Thus, in theory, this kind of battle didn't pose too much pressure for the cultivators. Lu Yi moved forward alone. Not far to his left were the members of Team D9. They had been working together since they were at the True Lake stage. Throughout their entire time at the Spirit Sea stage, they had spent most of their time killing corpses on the Peerless Continent. After so many years of working together, they had a tacit understanding of each other. The one at the front was the tall and mighty giant armor. His vitality was so strong that it did not seem like a constellation. Lin Xiao and Yi, who was riding on Hupo, were behind him. Further behind them were 3rd senior brother Xiao Xinghe and 4th senior brother Li Baxian. As for Feng Yuechan, she was surrounded in the center. The few of them noticed Lu Ye's gaze and turned to look at him. Li Baxian grinned and said, "Little junior brother, let us show you what senior brothers are capable of." Lu Yi nodded. "Then I'll have to take a good look." Speaking of which, he hadn't seen the Yu Yao fight for a long time. He didn't know how strong they were now. Looking to the right, it was the master Nian Yuxian, eldest senior brother Feng Wujiang and his wife. These two were not the only 9 states cultivators. The 300 constellation cultivators scattered into small teams, almost at the same time, as they rushed out of their respective warships. There were at least 4 to 5 people, and at most 6 to 7 people. This scene not only surprised the cultivators from the Green Dawn Dao world and Jade Conch world, but also the cultivators from the 4 galaxies. Although the 9 states cultivators were all in the early constellation realm, each team moved in a strict manner. There was a strange pattern to it. On the other hand, although they would also form teams, they seemed to lack a strange sense of closeness. The Yu Yao cultivators at the front had already begun to fight with the insectoids. Intense waves of magic power erupted from the battlefields. After a while, the constellation realm cultivators also began to attack. The power of many spells swept towards the insectoid swarm from all directions. Although they caused some damage, they couldn't stop the insectoid swarm from advancing. Resisting the attacks of many spells, the insectoid swarm came closer. The battle had completely erupted. All over the battlefield, strange phenomena suddenly appeared out of thin air. Those were the strange phenomena formed by battle formations. The most numerous one was the Black Tortoise Battle Formation. Many huge black tortoises formed by spiritual energy appeared on the battlefield with their heads held high and chests puffed out, causing both sides to be stunned. The Constellation Realm cultivators naturally didn't know what was going on, but the Green Dawn Dao world and Jade Conch world cultivators saw it clearly. Those battle formations were formed by the cultivators from the 9 Heavens realm. They were shocked. Were the cultivators from the 9 Heavens realm so close to each other? It was difficult to form a battle formation in such a battle. It required years of familiarity with each other to form a tacit understanding. Their auras had to be connected and flow as one. The Constellation Realm cultivators all had their own things to do. It was impossible for them to stay together and practice battle formations, unless some sects had special requirements. There were also cultivators from the Green Dawn Dao world and Jade Conch world who could form battle formations. However, those cultivators were all their closest brothers and sisters, and even their family members. However, the Nine Heavens Realm cultivators didn't fall behind. They formed teams of several people and formed different battle formations with ease. There was no sign of unfamiliarity in their cooperation. The Nine States cultivators also knew that they were weaker, so they chose battle formations that were mainly defensive. This was why there were so many black tortoises on the battlefield. Even if the strange phenomena from the other battle formations weren't black tortoises, most of them were good at defense. Under the impact of the battle formations, a large number of insectoids were killed. Lu Ye's figure was constantly moving, and he had already sent out a series of imperial artifacts in all directions, using them as support for his leaping technique. Using his divine thoughts, he found that the insectoids he found were all at the late stage of the constellation realm. As the Pan Shan saber flashed, even the insectoid's hard shells couldn't withstand a sharp blow. If it was the Pan Shan saber in the past, it wouldn't have such an effect, even if it was blessed with the divine blade spiritual inscriptions. However, the Pan Shan saber that Fong transformed into had extremely high sharpness. Together with the divine blade, no one in the constellation realm could block it. He wasn't worried about the cultivators on his side suffering casualties in such a battle. There were always casualties in a battle. Even if it wasn't here, it would be in the myriad phenomenon sea or somewhere else. However, compared to the possible casualties, the benefits that participating in such a battle would bring to the cultivators on his side were hard to come by. On the battlefield, veterans grew up step by step from new recruits. Participating in such a battle was enough to train the cultivators on his side into qualified veterans. In the future, if they were to encounter similar battles, they would have more experience in handling and dealing with them. Moreover, in this battle the possibility of casualties was not high. Soon the cultivators from the Qingli Taoist world and the Yukong world found another problem. Compared to the cultivators from the Nine Heavens realm, who could all form a battle formation, their fighting style was more surprising. For a long time, because the cultivators from the Nine Heavens realm were at the early stage of the constellation realm, the cultivators from the Qingli Taoist world and the Yukong world felt that they were superior to them. However, looking at it now, the fighting style of the cultivators from the Nine Heavens realm was extremely fierce and sharp. Even when facing the insectoids who were stronger than them, they didn't fear them and fought fiercely. This strange scene made it seem as if they were at the early stage of the constellation realm, while the cultivators from the Nine Heavens realm were at the late stage of the constellation realm. The cultivators from the two worlds were a little confused. They couldn't understand what the cultivators from the Nine Heavens realm had experienced in their growth. How could they fight so fiercely? It seemed that no one was afraid of death. The insectoids were ferocious enough, but compared to the cultivators from the Nine Heavens realm, they were like cats meeting tigers. They were suppressed in momentum. Even if they were slightly stronger, it was easy to be at a disadvantage in the battle. Lu Yi was still leaping. With the help of the many imperial weapons he had used in advance, the leaping technique greatly reduced the consumption of his body. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to leaping for such a long time in such a battle. His figure suddenly moved to a corner of the battlefield. The timing of his appearance was very clever. There was an insectoid at the late stage of the constellation realm, who had his back to him. Lu Yi raised his sword and cut off the insectoid's head. "Little junior brother, you've gone too far." Li Baxian shouted in dissatisfaction. They were fighting fiercely with the insectoid, but they didn't expect that their little junior brother would steal the kill. Lu Yi glanced at their battle formation and was slightly surprised. Because looking at the battlefield, there were many cultivators from the 9 provinces in the Black Tortoise battle formation. There were at least 30 to 40 Black Tortoise apparitions. However, Team D9's Black Tortoise was clearly different. The other Black Tortoise apparitions were only apparitions, but Team D9's Black Tortoise was clearly much more solid. Moreover, some strange patterns appeared on its back. Those strange patterns flickered as if they were breathing. Lu Yi even felt that these strange patterns had some strange and close connection with the giant armor in the battle formation. He understood that the abnormality of Team D9's battle formation definitely came from the giant armor. Because he remembered, the Yao core that the giant armor had swallowed seemed to be related to the black tortoise. It was precisely because Team D9's black tortoise battle formation was stronger that they could fight against a late-stage Constellation Realm insectoid as early-stage Constellation Realm cultivators. The other battle formations didn't have this ability. At most, they could fight against a mid-stage Constellation Realm insectoid. Ignoring Li Baxian's shouts, Lu Yi flashed away. Li Baxian was furious, but there was nothing he could do. He could only look for more opponents. Although the battle wasn't completely one-sided, the Cultivator Alliance clearly had the absolute upper hand. If they continued fighting like this, it wouldn't be long before all the insectoids that came out of the hive were killed. Chapter 1595. The battle was progressing smoothly. The Constellation cultivators had the upper hand, and the Yu Yao cultivators were suppressing the insectoid Yu Yao. This time, the 4 star systems had joined forces. Regardless of whether it was the Sunshine or Yu Yao cultivators, they outnumbered the insectoids by a large margin. As a result, all the insectoid Yu Yao cultivators were targeted. The Constellation cultivators could do whatever they wanted. Some Yu Yao cultivators couldn't even find a suitable opponent, so they could only bully the weak. With the Yu Yao cultivators facing off against the Constellation cultivators, they could kill them however they wanted. In the short time it took for an incense stick to burn, nearly 30% of the insectoids had died. Even the Yu Yao cultivators had died in battle. Under such circumstances, the insectoid situation was even worse. Lu Yi swept back and forth across the vast battlefield, bringing death wherever he went. He even had his eyes on an early-stage moon jade insectoid. Lu Yi did not know which galaxy this insectoid was from, but he was also an early-stage moon jade insectoid. The two sides were locked in a fierce battle. Lu Yi was about to use his sweeping technique to sneak attack the Yu Yao cultivator, to see if he could create an opportunity for his Yu Yao. However, before he could do anything, an angry roar suddenly came from the insectoid nest. The roar was a little strange. It was filled with anger and shock, as if something unbelievable had happened. As the roar rang out, a powerful aura suddenly disappeared. Lu Yi raised an eyebrow and turned to look at the insectoid nest. Since the start of the battle, only the Sunshine cultivators were fighting in the insectoid nest. The 4 Sunshine cultivators from the 4 star systems were fighting against 2 insectoids. Therefore, the insectoid nest was constantly emitting violent energy fluctuations, making it seem very chaotic. Now that the aura had disappeared, it meant that a Sunshine cultivator had died. Lu Yi was thinking that the Sunshine cultivators from the 4 star systems were quite strong. They actually managed to kill an insectoid Sunshine cultivator so quickly. After all, it was rare for a battle between Sunshine cultivators to be decided in a short time, unless the difference in strength was too great. However, considering that the 4 star systems were fighting 2 against 1, it wasn't too strange. Unexpectedly, when he looked over, Li Guan, who had been guarding the insectoid nest all this time, suddenly changed his expression. He turned into a streak of sword light and pounced toward the insectoid nest. Lu Yi was startled and immediately realized that something was wrong. Li Guan was stationed outside the hive to prevent Hikaru from escaping. She was obviously a sword cultivator. If Hikaru really wanted to escape, she was confident that she could stop him. However, at this moment, she had actually rushed into the insect nest. This was clearly not normal. The one who died just now, could it be the Zerg Sunshine? Lu Yi found it hard to believe, but if that weren't the case, Li Guan wouldn't have reacted in such a way. Moreover, this was completely illogical. They were fighting 2 against 1, so how could one of them be killed instead? Is the Zerg race's Sunshine that strong? Just as he was puzzled, a voice suddenly came from the insect nest. It was none other than Li Guan, who had just broken into the nest. All quiet moon cultivators, return to the warship immediately and await further orders. Anyone who dares to disobey will be killed by the cultivators of the 3 forces. When the order was issued, all the cultivators on the battlefield were confused. None of them knew what was going on. This war had been pushed forward by the joint efforts of the 4 star systems, and it had been progressing smoothly. But now, at this critical juncture, Li Guan had issued such a strange order. Moreover, it was after Hikaru had died in the hive. Right after Li Guan's cold voice resounded, Wuxia of the Daluo Galaxy shouted loudly, "Daluo Galaxy cultivators, obey orders." In the next instant, Bai Jin's voice resounded, "Fellow Taoists, why are you targeting my Jingyue?" This time, the four sides have joined forces, and Quiet Moon has also contributed greatly. Isn't it inappropriate to burn the bridge after crossing the river? Originally, after hearing Li Guan's order, the cultivators of Jingyue were confused. They didn't know why they were suddenly asked to return to the battleship when the battle was going well. At this moment, when they heard the voice of Rizhao, they suddenly had some doubts in their heart. The four star systems had coexisted in this part of the universe for many years. It was impossible for there to be no conflicts between them. However, they would not openly offend each other to avoid triggering a war between star systems. Hence, when Hikaru and Daluo started arguing, the cultivators below began to think that Hikaru and Daluo had joined forces to target Quiet Moon. Regardless of what the cultivators of the four star systems were thinking, Luya's expression was solemn. This was because Hikaru from all three star systems had spoken, but Qinzong from Beixian had not. Recalling the commotion caused by Rizhao's death and Chen Zongban's injuries, Luyi suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. Li Guan's voice was heard again. "Bai Jin, are you still trying to fish in troubled waters at a time like this?" Then she cried out, "Bai Jin from Quiet Moon is a blood breed in disguise. Chen Zong from Beixian has been killed." It wasn't appropriate to say this just now to avoid disturbing the morale of the troops. Hence, Li Guan ordered the cultivators of Quiet Moon to return to the warship and wait for further orders. Since Bai Jin was a blood breed in disguise, no one knew if there were more blood breeds hiding in Quiet Moon. If they suddenly attacked their allies in such a chaotic battle, they would definitely be killed. Since there was no way to tell whether the cultivators of Quiet Moon were blood breeds in disguise, the best way was to have them return to the warship and wait for further orders. Those who weren't blood breeds would naturally obey orders, but those who were blood breeds would take advantage of the situation to stir up trouble. At this point, Bai Jin still wanted to use words to confuse the troops, so Li Guan had no choice but to tell the truth. When Li Guan's voice fell, the entire battlefield was in an uproar, especially the cultivators from Beixian Galaxy. They were all stunned and could hardly believe their ears. When the sound of Hikaru's death came from the Zerg's nest, everyone thought it was Hikaru of the Zerg who was killed. Who would have thought that the one who died was not in Zerg, but Qinzong of Beixian? Hikaru of Quiet Moon was a pillar of strength in any galaxy. The death of any one of them was a great loss. There were only two Hikaru of Quiet Moon in the entire Beixian Galaxy. Now that Qinzong was dead, Beixian Galaxy was left with only one Hikaru. On the battlefield, Lu Yi was reaping the lives of the Zerg with a cold face. Because he had doubts in his heart, when Li Guan said those words, he wasn't too surprised. He finally understood why Bai Jin gave him a strange feeling when he saw him in the central hall. At that time, Lu Yi didn't know what kind of strange feeling it was. In front of Hikaru, he couldn't delve into it. Now that he thought about it, if the other party was a blood breed, then it made sense. He had refined a large amount of the blood kindred saint blood, and it could be said that his holiness was so strong that no blood kindred in the universe could be compared to him. Therefore, although he still maintained his human form, he had a hidden sense of the blood kindred. That strange feeling obviously came from the blood kindred's bloodline. Previously, when he warned Lan Qiue, he thought that there might be blood breeds who cultivated some mysterious secret arts that could hide their blood breed characteristics and disguise themselves as humans. Who would have thought that he would really encounter one? There might be more than one. Jingyue had Bai Jin, so who knew if there were more hidden blood breeds? That was why Li Guan gave such an order. However, this Bai Jin was also very powerful. Although he didn't know how long he had been hiding in the Jingyue Galaxy, he might have cultivated Hikaru without being exposed. Qinzong's death was unjust. He must have been targeted by Bai Jin long ago. Taking advantage of his injury and fighting Hikaru, Bai Jin suddenly killed him. Naturally, Qinzong couldn't resist. However, What Lu Yi couldn't understand was why Bai Jin exposed himself at this time. He had disguised himself as a human and operated in Jingyue for many years. He must have his own purpose. It seemed wrong to say that he exposed himself for the sake of Tu Zerg, because even if he exposed his identity at this moment, and even killed Chun Zong, the Zerg still couldn't gain the upper hand. Maybe Hikaru could compete. In the Zerg nest, it was a 3 versus 3 situation, but Hikaru was still no match for the Zerg. Or was his purpose just to save the Tu Zerg Hikaru? It was said that the Zerg and blood breeds were in cahoots, snakes and rats in the same nest, but their relationship was a little too good. Just when Lu Yi was puzzled, suddenly a scream of horror came from a certain direction. Vampires! Many vampires are coming! Lu Yi hurriedly looked up, and his expression froze. This was because in the distant starry sky, a large bloody light was sweeping over. It was like a sea of blood, and it wasn't just in the direction he was looking at. It was everywhere. Lu Yi's heart skipped a beat, realizing that they were in big trouble. Bai Jin's identity was exposed at this time, not just to save the Tu Zerg Hikaru, but also to destroy the 4-star system alliance. In other words, this was a joint operation between the Zerg and blood breeds, and they had reached the most critical moment. Lu Yi suddenly understood what Bai Jin was planning. He was planning to take down the 4-star system itself. This was because if the allied forces of the 4 galaxies were wiped out in this battle, Rizhao alone would lose 4 members, and Yu Yao's forces would suffer countless casualties. When the time came, the insectoids and vampires would seize this great victory and storm the Indefinite star system. How would Indefinite defend herself? Once Indefinite was taken down, the remaining 3 star systems could be taken down one by one. The 4-star system was a big fat piece of meat for the Zerg and blood breeds. The blood breeds could enslave the creatures in the 4-star system, and the Zerg could freely devour the vitality of the various star systems to expand their numbers. Thus, even though the Zerg had suffered heavy casualties so far, as long as they won this battle, the Zerg would reap hundreds or even thousands of times the rewards. Looking at it this way, it wasn't a coincidence that this hive had drifted here. It was specifically targeting the 4-star system. With Bai Jin as their spy, the Zerg and blood breeds had long coveted the 4-star system. This scheme had probably been in the works for many years. There was one thing that puzzled Lu Yi. Chapter 1596. Lu Yi suddenly recalled why the insectoids had acted so strangely at the start of the battle. They hadn't concentrated their forces in one direction, but had instead spread them out. It seemed like a brainless move, but in reality, it was to divert the attention of the cultivators from the 4 galaxies, so that the bloodlings could surround the battlefield. Reality proved that their plan was very successful. All the cultivators from the 4 galaxies, including those from the 3 realms on Lu Ye's side, were immersed in the joy of killing the insectoids. They didn't pay much attention to the battle outside. That was until the bloodlings appeared. But by then, there was no point in noticing. Waves of blood came from all directions at an extremely fast speed. This speed was clearly due to the fact that there was an expert controlling the sea of blood. In just a short moment, the entire battlefield was practically surrounded by the sea of blood. However, the sea of blood showed no signs of stopping. It seemed as if it was going to envelop the entire battlefield. Once the blood sea descended, the human cultivators would be forced into a passive position. The bloodlings and insectoids, on the other hand, would be like fish in water. Lu Yi had used the blood sea to kill enemies before, so he was very familiar with its mysteries. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. His first thought was to quickly gather the cultivators of the 3 realms and escape. The blood sea hadn't completely surrounded them yet, so there was still a gap. They might still have a chance. However, Kong Qing's previous arrangements had foiled his plans. The cultivators of the 3 realms were scattered all over the battlefield. It was impossible for him to gather everyone in a short time. Under such circumstances, not to mention gathering the cultivators of the 3 dimensions in a short period of time, even gathering the cultivators of the 9 provinces was utterly impossible. Everyone, including the cultivators of the 4 galaxies, were swept into the battle, and were utterly unable to escape easily. What should I do? Lu Yi asked himself over and over again, but he couldn't think of a solution. He also thought of an even more serious consequence. If the insectoids and bloodlings really took over the 4 galaxies, the Jade Conch tribe would be in danger. When the time came, the 2 races would have to go through the Thousand Hills Grave and the Chaotic Explosion Zone to explore the outside world. Once they entered the Jade Conch galaxy, it could be said that the Jade Conch tribe and Apiron were basically interdependent. An even more violent energy fluctuation than before came from the insectoid nest. Lu Yi instinctively turned to look and saw that the nest had suddenly shattered. Even though the hive was extremely sturdy, it was unable to withstand the constant battle between the Sunshine State cultivators. At this moment, it finally exploded into pieces. 3 of them were Ningbu Ao, Li Guan, and Luo Xie of Big Luo. Of the other 3, 2 were obviously Hikari from the Zerg, and 1 was obviously a blood breed. He looked 70% similar to Bai Jin, but compared to Bai Jin, he was obviously much taller, and his skin was blood red. At this moment, the 6 Rizhao were fighting fiercely against each other. When the cultivators of the mysterious North Star system didn't see Chunzong's figure, they finally realized that Chunzong had fallen. The feelings of the cultivators of Jingyue Constellation were even more complicated. Bai Jin, who was originally a mainstay of this world, was actually a vampire in disguise. Moreover, he had killed an ally of Rizhao, which made them feel ashamed and uneasy. As the terrifying energy spread, 3 rays of blood-red light came from different directions from the sea of blood. All 3 rays of blood-red light emanated the aura of a Sunshine State cultivator. This scene made the hearts of all the cultivators turn cold. They knew that this was really the end. The blood breed had sent 3 Sunshine State cultivators, and these were only the ones who had shown their faces. No one knew if there were others who hadn't shown their faces yet. In a one-on-one fight, Ningbu Ao and the others had been able to hold their ground. But now that the 3 blood breeds had joined the battle, it was their turn to fight 2 Sunshine State cultivators. The situation was not looking good. Fellow cultivator Lu, come with me. Suddenly, a Yuyao rushed toward Lu Yi with a panicked expression. As he approached, he shouted. Judging by the spiritual energy fluctuations around him, he was obviously an early Yuyao. Lu Yi turned his head and glanced at him. He responded with a yes and charged straight at him. The moment they drew near, the panic on the Yuyao's face disappeared. He reached out to grab Lu Yi. Magic energy surged in his palm, forming a vortex. Immediately, an invisible force pulled Lu Ye's body. Lu Ye's expression didn't change. He seemed to have expected this. His body glowed with blood-red light, and in an instant, a sea of blood spread out, enveloping him and Yuyao. The other party clearly hadn't expected such a turn of events. He was caught off guard by the sea of blood. He was shocked. As far as he knew, Lu Yi was a weapon cultivator. It was rare for him to be able to use such an exquisite blood Dao secret technique. But in the next moment, Yu Yao's expression changed. That was because the sea of blood emanated an incomparably strong pressure that he couldn't resist. Under the cover of this mysterious pressure, Yu Yao felt his strength being greatly suppressed. The flow of magic energy in his body was obscure, and even his blood and qi seemed to be on the verge of freezing. Then a saber light flashed and slashed at his neck. Even the mountain plate blade enhanced with the divine edge couldn't cut off Yu Yao's head. It only cut halfway in. It was obvious how strong his physique was. Yu Yao's expression was pained. He cocked his head and looked at Lu Yi in disbelief. A holy seed? This weapon cultivator in front of him didn't use any blood Dao secret technique. It was the purest blood sea technique of the blood tribe. What made him even more uneasy was that the sea of blood was surging with a holy aura so strong that it was almost tangible. He didn't even dare to think about it. How could there be a holy seed with such a strong holy aura in this world? How much holy blood did one refine to reach this level? Fellow Taoists, please have mercy. I'm a member of the blood tribe. Yu Yao hurriedly cried out in panic. Although he didn't understand why Lu Yi was a holy seed, since he was a holy seed, he was one of them. Lu Ye's expression was indifferent. Got it. His other hand suddenly grabbed the mountain plate blade's hilt. He exerted force with both hands, and the blade, which was half buried in Yu Yao's neck, slashed down. Yu Yao's head flew into the air, and his eyes were wide open as he died with remaining grievances. He really didn't understand why Lu Yi would still kill him, even after he had revealed his identity as a member of the blood tribe. The sea of blood disappeared, and Lu Ye's figure appeared. The mountain plate blade wasn't stained by a single drop of blood. He had sensed it the moment Yu Yao approached him. This Yu Yao gave him a similar feeling to Bai Jin. So he immediately understood that she was also a member of the blood tribe in disguise. If it were an ordinary Yu Yao, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to kill her so easily. However, Yu Yao of the blood tribe was his nemesis. Back when he left the Blue Jade realm, a late-stage Yu Yao had chased after him, but he had killed that Yu Yao. This time, he was facing an early-stage Yu Yao. Of course, he was only able to kill late-stage Yu Yao thanks to Li Shang's soul battle. Otherwise, with his strength at the time, he wouldn't have been able to do anything to her. But things were different now. The mountain plate blade was transformed from pyrolite, and it was incomparably sharp. Yu Yao's physical body was strong, but it was suppressed by the holy aura. She couldn't block pyrolite's attack at all. Chaos, everything was in chaos. Li Guan had already ordered the Quiet Moon cultivators to return to the battleship and wait for further orders. Now that the Blood Tribe had launched a large-scale attack, the situation became even more chaotic. It was impossible for the cultivators of Quiet Moon to return to the warships. There was no telling how many vampires were hiding among them. Therefore, the cultivators of the other 3 galaxies had their hands tied when fighting against the enemy. No one knew if they would be ambushed secretly. Lu Yi gazed at the chaotic battlefield and the sea of blood that was spreading out from all directions. He knew that if he didn't do something now, the allied forces of the 4 star systems and the cultivators of the 3 realms would all die here. In fact, even he himself might not be able to escape alive. However, on such a large battlefield, even if he was a cultivator of the absolute sunshine realm, would he have the ability to turn the tide, much less a single constellation realm cultivator? Lu Yi suddenly flipped his hand, and something appeared in his palm. He lowered his head and glanced at it. He didn't know if his idea would work or not. And even if it did, it was hard to say how effective it would be. However, since things had already come to this point, he could only try everything he could. He put the thing in his hand to his mouth and pressed a few sound holes with his fingers. He stirred his breath and gently blew on it. Even in the starry sky, there was a low sound coming from the thing in his hand. The surrounding cultivators looked over curiously in panic. No one knew why Lu Yi would take out a bone sun and play it in such a terrible way. However, no one was paying attention to him anymore. As the sea of blood approached, everyone was thinking about how to protect themselves. A figure suddenly moved to Lu Ye's side. It was Wuxia. She looked fine, and the spear in her hand was still stained with blood. It should be the result of the battle with the insect tribe. After all, she was in the late stage of the full moon realm. Without the absolute sunshine, almost no one on the battlefield could pose a threat to her life. Looking at Lu Yi, Wuxia looked guilty. I'm sorry. Kong Cheng had originally wanted them to head to a Pylon first and discuss the matter of setting off for the Wanxiang Sea after the battle was over. However, Wuxia felt that this was a rare opportunity and wanted to join in to experience it. Now that she had joined in on the fun, things had turned out well. The cultivators of the 3 realms had set off from the Qingli Dao world with great ambition, but they were still halfway there and were about to be wiped out by the insect tribe and the blood clan. Lu Yi continued to play the bone sun for a while before putting it away in disappointment. He said, "Joining the battle here was the decision of me and my friend. If there are any consequences, we will bear them together. You don't have to blame yourself. Even if we really go to indefinite first, we may not be able to avoid this disaster. After the insect tribe and the blood clan take over the 4 directions galaxy, they will first deal with the indefinite galaxy. When that happens, we will also be involved in it. Moreover, once the insect tribe and the blood clan take over the 4 directions galaxy, the first to suffer would be the Jade Snail Galaxy. My friend, please help me gather the 3 realms. Chapter 1597. Team D9 was fighting hard against the enemy, and there were two other teams from the 9 states beside them. The situation was chaotic, and the cultivators from the 4 constellations were at a loss. However, the cultivators from the 9 states had experienced many big and small battles, so they had a certain ability to adapt. In the face of such sudden changes, they performed much better than the cultivators from the 4 constellations. They were trying to find a way to gather, but unfortunately, because they were too scattered, only 2 teams met up with Team D9. The other teams also adhered to the principle of proximity and moved closer to each other. Their approach undoubtedly influenced the cultivators from the Qingli Dao world and the Yukong world, and they all gathered towards the teams from the 9 states. "Follow me." Lu Yi came to the side of Team D9, called out, and slashed forward with his saber. The crowd did not say a word and followed closely. Lu Ye's figure was like a shuttle, moving forward on the battlefield. The blood kindred had not spread the sea of blood to the center of the battlefield for the time being, only completing the encirclement on the periphery. The insect clan on this side of the battlefield was already at a disadvantage, so there was not much resistance along the way. The more he moved forward, the more cultivators from the 3 realms followed behind him. Not only that, even the cultivators from the 4 constellations voluntarily joined in, making the group of cultivators behind Lu Yi stronger and stronger. Time was too short, and Lu Yi had no time to find all the cultivators from the 3 realms. Seeing that the sea of the blood kindred had already penetrated, he had no choice but to lead the cultivators behind him back to the location of a warship. Second senior sister Shui Yuan and Wuxia were on this warship. The 2 of them were medical cultivators and were not good at fighting, so they did not enter the battlefield during the previous battle, but stayed on the warship to wait for orders. This way, if there were injured cultivators, they could return to the warship to be treated. Yaya was also left on this warship by Lu Yi and handed over to Wuxia to take care of. If there was a relatively safe place on the entire battlefield, it would be this warship. When Lu Yi led a large group of cultivators back, Luan Xiao also rushed back. She gathered more cultivators from the 3 realms. After all, her cultivation was higher and she could move faster. Lu Yi swept his gaze over the area, his expression grim. Although he and Luan Xiao had hurried over, they had still only gathered about half of the cultivators of the 3 realms. At this time, it was unrealistic for them to send a message to gather the others. There were battles everywhere. Not to mention whether the cultivators of the 3 realms had the time to investigate the sound talismans. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to rush over without sufficient strength. Luan Xiao hurriedly said, "I'll go look for it again. I'll have to trouble fellow Taoists to stay here." Lu Yi quickly stopped her. "Stay here, I'll go look for it." Lu Yi quickly stopped her. "You stay here, I'll go look for it." Once the sea of blood was completely unleashed, Luan Xiao would be hard-pressed to do anything even though she was at the Moon Jade late stage. Moreover, because her cultivation was higher, it was very likely that she would be targeted by the powerful beings of the blood tribe. Lu Yi himself, on the other hand, was only a late-stage constellation realm cultivator. He also had the blood race's secret arts, so it was easier for him to do things. Leaving Luan Xiao here was undoubtedly the safer choice. Lu Yi then looked at Lan Qiyue. "Junior sister, I'll leave this to you. If they wanted to fight against the blood tribe in the Sea of Blood, using the same blood race's secret arts was undoubtedly the best way." Lu Yi wanted to find the cultivators of the 3 realms who had been separated, so Lan Qiyue just happened to stay here to assist Luan Xiao. Along the way, Lu Yi had already taught Lan Qiyue the Holy Convergence technique and the Blood Cry technique. These 2 blood races' secret arts were learned from the blood tribe when he was in the Alpha Origin realm. The former could restrain one's own holy nature, making it easier to cooperate with other blood race members. The latter was used to find other blood race members, so it wouldn't be of much use at this time. Although Lan Qiyue's cultivation wasn't high, she had refined a drop of sacred blood, so there was still some holy nature in her body. With the Holy Convergence technique, she could restrain her own holy nature and burst it out at the right time. It would definitely have a miraculous effect. with Luan Xiao and Lan Qiyue working together, and with Yaya secretly keeping watch, the problem of the warship wasn't big, unless the blood race had other Sunshine Realm cultivators hiding. Lan Qiyue naturally understood Lu Ye's intentions and nodded solemnly. "Senior brother, don't worry, I know what to do." Lu Ye's figure flickered, and void spirit runes appeared under his feet. He disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in a sea of blood. After such a long time, the blood race's sea of blood had almost completely infiltrated the battlefield. The only place it hadn't penetrated was the battlefield where the Sunshine Realm cultivators were. But the Sunshine Realm cultivators' battlefield had 3 blood race cultivators joining in, and there was already a sea of blood there, surging like a tide. Inside the sea of blood, Lu Yi immediately activated the blood race's secret arts, and his own sea of blood spread out in all directions. He was now at the late-stage constellation realm, and his body was full of vitality. The sea of blood covered a large area, and within the range, everything could be reflected in his mind with just a thought. At this moment, a group of cultivators was running around in the sea of blood like headless flies. They were tired of dealing with the blood race's attacks, and just when they thought that they were doomed, their vision suddenly became clear. Originally, because of the interference of the sea of blood, they couldn't detect the blood race's movements in time, and were restrained in every way. But now the interference suddenly disappeared, and they could clearly sense all the movements of the enemies nearby. They were instantly confused, because there was only one possibility for such a situation, and that was that the blood race was secretly helping them. But would such a thing happen? They couldn't understand why, but this kind of help was real. They immediately cheered up, and took advantage of the blood race's attack to kill them when they were unprepared. Just as they finished off a few blood race cultivators, the cultivators felt a kind of guidance coming from the sea of blood beside them. At the same time, a person's voice sounded in their ears. "Follow me." They didn't know who it was, but the cultivators still followed the guidance and moved forward. Although they were still in the sea of blood, the interference from before was no longer there. As they moved forward, more and more cultivators gathered around them. Among them were many cultivators from the 4 galaxies, and there were also cultivators from the 3 realms. They took some time to talk with each other, and they found that everyone was in the same situation. They were originally trapped in the sea of blood and couldn't tell the direction, but the interference of the sea of blood suddenly disappeared, and then there was a strange guidance guiding them forward. The cultivators from the 4 galaxies didn't know what was going on, but the cultivators from the 9 provinces knew that this was Lu Ye's doing. Back then, when the cultivators of the 9 provinces went on an expedition to the blood refinement realm, many of the blood race's experts were completely restrained by Lu Yi. Although these blood race cultivators they encountered now were much stronger than those from the blood refinement realm, the restraint didn't seem to have changed. They couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Lu Yi was Lu Yi after all. He could change the world in the 9 provinces, and he was just as dazzling on the star boat. In the sea of blood that Lu Yi displayed, the number of cultivators grew larger and larger. Not only were there cultivators from the 4 galaxies, but there were also Yu Yao. These Yu Yao all came from the 4 galaxies. They were originally struggling to cope with the blood race's Yu Yao, but for some reason, the blood race's Yu Yao suddenly became weak. Their strength fell sharply, and they were easily killed on the spot. Even now, Yu Yao still couldn't figure out why this happened. Half a day later, Lu Yi led a large group of cultivators back to the location of the battleship. There were many blood race cultivators surging in the sea of blood, besieging the battleship. Even though Luan Xiao, a late-stage Yu Yao, was personally overseeing the situation, and Lan Qiyue was secretly helping them, the situation was still very dangerous. Lu Yi brought the cultivators back at the right time. His side strength suddenly increased, and in the blink of an eye, they killed the blood race cultivators besieging the battleship. Many cultivators joined up with Luan Xiao and the others, and the battleship's defensive strength increased greatly. Lu Yi didn't stop to rest and charged out. He had just walked around the battlefield. He had found all the cultivators of the 3 realms he could find. Those who couldn't were probably already dead. There were enough cultivators gathered around the battleship. Even the Yu Yao had about 10 of them. They could protect themselves for a short period of time. However, the decision-maker for this battle wasn't the Yu Yao, or the Yu constellations. It was Rizhao. If Ningbu Ao and the others could win, they would win this battle. If Ningbu Ao and the others lost, they would lose this battle without a doubt. Then all the human cultivators on the battlefield would be slaughtered. That was why Lu Yi wanted to see if he could help Ningbu Ao and the others with his own strength. The suppression of the holy attribute should be useful against the blood race cultivator Rizhao. After all, it was a suppression of the bloodline. It had nothing to do with cultivation. The blood race army's blood sea didn't spread toward Rizhao's battlefield. Even if it did, it would be pointless. The intensity of the battle was beyond what they could help with. Lu Yi came to the edge of the blood sea and looked over. His heart sank. Although he couldn't see the exact situation on Rizhao's battlefield, he could tell from the energy waves that Ningbu Ao and the others were in dire straits. 3 against 6 meant that each of them had to deal with 2 elites of the same level. Blood race cultivator Rizhao had also used the blood sea to create an advantage for himself. Ningbu Ao and the others were powerless. Lu Yi wanted to sneak into Rizhao's battlefield and use his holy attribute to surprise the blood race cultivators. But looking at the situation, he knew that wouldn't work. Just the shockwaves from Rizhao's battle weren't something he could withstand. How could he get close to the battlefield? Even if he managed to get close, his life would be in danger. If Rizhao killed him with a slap, it would be a terrible death. Should he ask Ye to send him over? But Ye's situation was strange. Every time she used Rizhao's power, she would become weak. She couldn't use Rizhao's power for long. Lu Yi wasn't sure if she could hold on. More importantly, even if he used his holy attribute to suppress the blood race, they only had 3 Rizhao. If they couldn't kill blood race cultivator Rizhao in a short amount of time, they would still die. Chapter 1598. The only thing they could do now was to escape. They could escape to the indefinite realm and warn Jiang Shang before the outcome of the battle was decided. As long as Jiang Shang was fast enough, he could contact Rizhao from the other 3 galaxies and form an army of cultivators. They might be able to contend against the vampires and insectoids. Lu Yi dashed toward the battleship again. With the sea of blood surrounding him, the vampires didn't pay him much attention, even though his movements were suspicious. Instead, he took advantage of the chaos to kill many vampires and insectoids. On his way back, he brought back many human cultivators. When he returned to the battleship, he told Luan Xiao his plan. Luan Xiao knew this was the only way, and immediately agreed with Lu Yi. The battleship immediately set off to break out of the encirclement. All the cultivators on the battleship were on high alert, their expressions grim. No one knew if they could succeed in breaking out of the encirclement, but they had no choice but to give it a try. The battleship had already attracted the attention of many vampires when it first appeared here. However, with Luan Xiao, a late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivator, and Lan Qiu's help, the vampires hadn't been able to take down the battleship. Once Lu Yi returned with reinforcements, the vampires wouldn't be able to do anything about it. If the battleship remained here, the vampires wouldn't care too much. If they couldn't take down the battleship, they could go kill the others. It wouldn't be too late to deal with this nail after the battle was over. However, the battleship was about to break out of the encirclement, and the vampires couldn't bear it any longer. A large number of vampires immediately gathered from all directions in the Sea of Blood. There was no lack of vampires from the Moon Jade Realm among them. They shuttled through the Sea of Blood like ghosts and launched attacks from all directions. The battleship's defensive formation had already been activated. This kind of formation was quite powerful, but the Sea of Blood was extremely corrosive and was the bane of defensive formations. Hence, the battleship only took 5 minutes to travel through the Sea of Blood before the defensive formation was completely destroyed. Without the defensive formation, the cultivators could only face the vampires' attacks head-on. In such a battlefield, the power that spell cultivators could unleash was limited. Casting spells in the Blood Sea was bound to encounter heavy resistance, and their power would be greatly reduced. On the other hand, the Blood Race's Blood Dao secret spells would not be weakened in the Blood Sea. Therefore, when killing enemies in the Blood Sea, close combat was the best choice. But in such an environment, who would dare to leave the warship and rush into the Blood Sea to kill the enemy? What everyone did was to protect as much as possible. On this point, the cultivators of the 9 regions had a big advantage. Most of the battle formations they formed were mainly for defense. Lu Yi stood on the battleship, his brows furrowed. In the current situation, he was also somewhat powerless. Previously, when he was roaming around, he could still activate the Blood Sea technique and disguise himself as a member of the Blood Race to kill wantonly. This was because he basically killed and left at the same time. He would never stay in one place. Even if his actions were suspicious, no Blood Race would pay attention to him. But now he was on the battleship. If he still did that, he would be exposed very quickly. But it seemed that he had no choice. In his senses, there were already 7 or 8 Yu Yao from the insect race who were attacking the battleship. Although there were quite a number of Yu Yao on his side, they could only passively defend. Sooner or later, they would slip up. Once they slipped up, the Yu Yao's lives might not be in danger, but the constellations would be in trouble. At this thought, Lu Yi hurriedly transmitted a message to the Yu Yao on his side, telling them to get ready. Then, he quietly spread out his Blood Sea and merged it with the surrounding Blood Sea. The Blood Race's Sea of Blood could merge with each other. Not only could it expand in size, it could also increase the Blood Race's strength. This was also the reason why the entire battlefield was enveloped by the Blood Race's Sea of Blood. This Sea of Blood was formed by countless Blood Race's secret techniques. As the Blood Sea merged, Lu Yi sensed with his heart and calmly waited. Until a certain moment, he suddenly activated his own holiness and shouted, "Now is the time!" Almost at the same time, Luan Xiao and the others, who had long since made preparations, simultaneously activated their powers and looked in different directions. At first, the Blood Race's Yu Yao had been hiding in the Blood Sea like ghosts, making it impossible for them to pinpoint their exact location. Even if they wanted to counterattack, they couldn't. But now, they seemed to be able to see the Yu Yao's figures. Not only that, but they also discovered, to their surprise, that the Yu Yao's bodies were all stiff and their faces were filled with fear. It was as though they had encountered something extremely terrifying. The next moment, the Yu Yao on the battleship began to move, charging in different directions. Powerful vitality began to ebb and flow at this moment. In the blink of an eye, the Yu Yao around the battleship had been wiped out one after another. Even those constellations had been slain by Yu Yao of the human race. The battleship's surroundings suddenly became clear. When Luan Xiao and the others returned to the starship, they all stared at Lu Yi in shock. No one knew what kind of mysterious method he had used, because when they attacked the opponents they had chosen, those opponents didn't have any strength to resist at all. They were like little chicks that were casually squashed to death. Such a miraculous method was simply unheard of. A Yu Yao from the Daluo star system said excitedly, "Fellow Taoist Lu, if you have such methods." Lu Yi knew what he wanted to say, but before he could finish he shook his head and said, "I can't intervene in Rizhao's battlefield." The Daluo Yu Yao's face immediately darkened. If he couldn't intervene in Rizhao's battlefield, Lu Yi wouldn't be able to use his methods. They could rely on Lu Ye's help to sweep through this battlefield. But what was the point if they couldn't solve the problem on Rizhao's level? Once the outcome of the battle on Rizhao's level was decided, only destruction awaited them. Hence, they had to flee as soon as possible. Just as he was speaking, Lu Ye's expression suddenly changed, and he turned to look in a certain direction. From that direction, an extremely powerful divine will swept over in an overbearing manner. Rizhao. Luan Xiao's face paled, and the other Yu Yao's expressions turned ugly. Lu Yi knew what he was most worried about had happened. The blood breed had sent more than 3 Rizhao this time. There were 4 of them. 3 of them had attacked Ningbu Ao, Liguan Luoxia and the others. The last one hadn't shown himself until now. Lu Yi and the others' actions had caused the blood breed to suffer heavy losses. They had killed 7 or 8 Yu Yao, as well as mini Xingxiu. This anomaly had immediately attracted the attention of Rizhao, who was hiding in the dark. As the divine will spread, Rizhao's terrifying aura also spread out. From the depths of the blood sea, the aura was rapidly approaching. Luan Xiao and the others looked miserable. They had thought that with the battleship's current power and Lu Ye's miraculous methods, escaping would not be a problem. But now, it seemed that they had been wishful thinking. With Rizhao here, everyone on the battleship would probably die. Lu Yi flashed over to Yiya, who was riding on Hu Po's back. He stared at her seriously. Yiya, someone is coming to kill Daddy. Yiya was playing with Hu Po. No matter how dangerous the situation was, she didn't care. But when Lu Yi said this, she suddenly sat up straight. Her eyes widened as she stared in the direction that blood-breed Rizhao was coming from. Her small face was filled with anger. Lu Yi lifted his hand and pulled her down from Hu Po's back. He looked in the same direction as her and transmitted his voice to her. When I tell you to attack, you attack. Yiya nodded seriously. I will listen to Daddy. Lu Yi sweated. Although he had always treated Yiya as his final trump card, Lu Yi had never thought that he would need to use her in some way. Although Yiya was Rizhao, she still looked like a child. Normally she acted like a child. Lu Yi felt a little guilty about letting Yiya help him get through this difficult situation. He felt that he was an irresponsible parent, letting his child do the work for him when he couldn't solve the problem. That blood-breed Rizhao came very quickly. He obviously wasn't on guard against this side. After all, with Rizhao's cultivation level, the strongest person he could sense was Luan Xiao. There was no need for him to care. He just wanted to know what had happened in that instant that caused so many of his clan's cultivators to die. In an instant, a figure landed in front of the battleship, blocking their way. Even with the blood sea blocking them, at such a close distance, everyone could clearly see the appearance of this blood breed. He wasn't much different from most other blood breeds. His skin was blood red, his figure was tall, and his ears were sharp. But his expression was full of malice. Lu Yi saw that he was so close and cheered in his heart. He was really afraid that this person wouldn't come close. Although his blood sea covered a large area, there was still a limit. The suppression of his divine nature could only be effective within the area covered by his blood sea. It couldn't be suppressed outside of the area. If this Rizhao had used the blood breed's secret technique from a distance, he would be helpless. But the other party was confident in his strength and came close. So he didn't have to be polite. Yaya. Lu Yi sent a telepathic message and pushed Yaya from behind. Beat him up. When the blood breed Rizhao arrived, he was still observing Lu Yi and the others. He saw that Lu Yi had actually pushed a child out. While he was puzzled, Yaya had already rushed in front of him like an arrow released from a bow. A small fist was aimed at his head. The blood clan member Rizhao frowned. He did not understand what was going on. But in the next moment his expression changed. This was because Yaya, who was originally as ordinary as a child, suddenly exuded Rizhao's ferocious aura when she punched. He instinctively raised his hand to block. But at that moment, a terrifying suppression descended from the sky. In an instant, the blood-breed Rizhao felt that the circulation of his spiritual power had stagnated a lot, and the blood in his body was greatly affected. Rizhao's aura suddenly dropped a lot. With a scream, he hurriedly retreated. Blood splattered, mixed with broken limbs and minced flesh. Yaya's punch had actually shattered both of his hands. Chapter 1599. However, the Blood Clan's Rizhao also used this force to retreat, and in the blink of an eye he escaped. Yaya was unforgiving. She chased after him like a tiger let out of its cage. Lu Yi also chased after her. He wanted to suppress the Blood Clan's Rizhao with his own holiness, so he could not be too far away from him. But Rizhao was still Rizhao. His speed was ridiculously fast. Lu Yi had just chased after him, but Rizhao had already escaped the range of his blood sea. Lu Yi couldn't do anything about it. Yaya, on the other hand, was able to catch up. She was in the depths of the blood sea, waving her two small fists at Rizhao. Rizhao was exhausted from the bombardment and complained incessantly. Seeing that Yaya and Rizhao were getting farther and farther away from him, Lu Yi could only helplessly shout, "Yaya, come back!" The main reason was that he didn't know how long Yaya could maintain this state. If the time was short, and Yaya lost Rizhao's power, she would have no room to resist against the strong blood clan. Yaya was very obedient. When she heard Lu Ye's voice, she immediately turned around and flew back to him. Lu Yi hugged her, and looked at the vampire Rizhao's position with some reluctance. He quickly turned around, and flew back to the warship. When they returned to the warship, Yaya was already curled up in Lu Ye's arms, whispering, "Daddy's sleepy. Don't sleep, hang in there." Lu Yi patted her little head. It was certain that even though Rizhao had suffered a small loss at Yaya's hands, it was impossible for him to retreat. At this moment he must be observing their movements. If Yaya was awake, it could be used as a deterrent, so the other party wouldn't dare to act rashly. But if Yaya was asleep, there was no telling what the other party would do. If he attacked again, without Yaya's protection, the people on the warship wouldn't be able to fight back. But Yaya looked too sleepy. Even if she tried to keep herself awake, her eyelids couldn't help but close together, and her little head was nodding. Just as Lu Yi expected, at this moment, the retreating blood clan's Rizhao was looking at them in bewilderment. Compared to the terrifying strength that Yaya had just displayed, what shocked him even more was the instantaneous outburst of her holiness. He was also an existence that had refined sacred blood. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to advance to sunshine. However, he didn't refine much sacred blood, only one drop. This was because sacred blood was an extremely precious and rare treasure, even within the blood clan. Furthermore, no matter how strong one's cultivation was, the process of refining sacred blood was filled with unpredictable dangers. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the blood clan would only refine one drop of sacred blood. Very few would dare to refine a second drop. Possessing the holy blood and being a holy seed, the blood kindred Sunshine was no stranger to the holy nature. He had also felt the holy nature of other holy seeds before, but he had never felt as strong and terrifying as he did just now. There was a saint seed on the battleship, and it was definitely a saint seed that had refined more than one drop of saint blood. But since it was a holy seed, why did it want to deal with him? The blood kindred Sunshine couldn't figure out the crux of the matter. He was shocked by the power that Yaya had just displayed, but he was also afraid of the holy nature's suppression. He didn't dare move forward. He just followed the battleship from a distance. At the same time, he used his will to send a message to the other 3 blood kindred Sunshine, who were in the center of the battlefield. He was alone, so he didn't dare come forward to investigate the situation. But if the other 3 blood kindred Sunshine came with him, then there wouldn't be a problem. Then, with the combined power of the 4 kindred sons, they would be able to uncover the secrets of the battleship. Sacred blood was too tempting for the blood kindred. Compared to the 4 galaxies, the blood kindred cared more about the sacred blood. So if the news spread, the 3 blood kindred Sunshine, who were fighting Ningbu Ao and the others, would definitely come. As for Sunshine's battle, Ningbu Ao and the others were all injured. Even if they retreated from the battlefield, Bai Jin and the other 2 insect kindred Sunshine would continue to suppress them. Ningbu Ao and the others couldn't make a comeback. On the battleship, Lu Yi could feel blood kindred Sunshine's presence from afar. He was following them in the depths of the blood sea. They couldn't count on Yaya anymore. Although she was trying her best not to fall asleep, every time she unleashed Nicho's power, she would need to sleep for a while before she could recover. Therefore, if Nicho of the blood clan were to rush over at this time, they really didn't have a good way to deal with him. The only reason he hadn't come was because he was afraid. But he wouldn't let the battleship leave the blood sea. Once the battleship left the blood sea, he would attack again. Then they would be exposed. Many thoughts flashed through Lu Ye's mind. He tried to think of a way out of this situation. No matter what, he had to at least take the people on the battleship and escape. But the difference in power between them made it impossible for him to carry out any of his plans. Wan Xiao seemed to see Lu Ye's dilemma. She said, "Brother Lu, I will attack later. I will try to delay Sunshine. No matter what, you have to take them and escape." Her expression was resolute. She knew what would happen if she fought Sunshine with her late-stage Yuyao strength, but she had made the decision to participate in this battle. She had to take responsibility for her decision. If her death could save the lives of the cultivators of the three realms, then her death would be worth it. Her sacrifice moved the other Yuyao. Immediately, a grand immortal Yuyao spoke up. Brother Luan, I will help you. With one person speaking up, a second person spoke up. Soon, all the Yuyao on the battleship expressed their willingness to fight alongside Luan Xiaoa. One of the indestructible Yao looked at Lu Yi with a grave expression. Brother Lu, you have to inform Brother Jiang Shang about this no matter what. The survival of the indestructible star system and the four-direction star system depends on you alone. The indestructible star system definitely didn't know about the battle here. If the Blood Kindred won the battle here, they would definitely set off for the indestructible star system. How could the defenseless indestructible be a match for them then? But if Lu Yi could inform Jiang Shang in advance, they might have a chance at survival. The Yuyao were clearly prepared to die. With so many Yuyao working together, they might have a chance at stopping Sunshine. Unfortunately, the twin breath formation disc wasn't suitable for the Yuyao to use right now. Otherwise, Lu Yi would definitely leave a few formation discs for them. Lu Yi sighed inwardly. Just as he was about to agree, he suddenly sensed something. He turned toward the center of the battlefield, and his expression became calm. Everyone prepared to fight to the death. This couldn't be helped. 3 powerful auras were rushing toward them from the center of the battlefield. It was none other than the 3 Blood Kindred Sunshine, who had joined the battle earlier. Lu Yi knew that this was probably the result of him activating his divine attribute. The 4th Blood Kindred Sunshine was suppressed by the divine attribute and injured by Yaya. Now he was tailing behind the battleship, not daring to approach. He had actually called for reinforcements from his own race. How cautious of him. Lu Ye's side was already powerless against Sunshine alone. Now that there were 3 more, how were they supposed to stop him? They could only fight to the death. Luan Xiaoa and the others obviously sensed this as well. Their expressions were miserable. The 4th Blood Kindred Sunshine was still tailing behind the battleship. In the direction of the center of the battlefield, 3 more Rikas were attacking. In such a hopeless situation, many human cultivators on the battleship looked terrified. Only the cultivators of the 9 states were in high spirits. Knowing full well that they were bound to die, they were powerless to resist. But even if they died, they still had to die with dignity, with a bit of backbone. Cultivators dying in battle was the most normal ending. Every cultivator from the 9 regions had long been mentally prepared for such an outcome. Lu Yi put the sleeping Yayao aside and stood still. A figure flashed beside him. Lu Yi turned around and saw Yi smiling at him without any fear. Instead, she said, "Don't even think about leaving me behind now." Lu Yi raised his hand and rubbed her head. He didn't say anything for a moment. He secretly activated the spiritual power in his body and began to activate the power of the red talisman. If there was anything in his hand that could threaten Sunshine, it would be the red talisman given by Su Yuqing. However, Lu Yi wasn't sure how much of an impact the red talisman would have on Sunshine if its full power erupted. Maybe it could hurt Sunshine, maybe it couldn't. However, if he used the suppression of the divine nature and activated the power of the red talisman, the chances would be greater. However, he had to grasp this opportunity well. He had always regarded the red talisman as his last trump card. Usually, he was reluctant to use it. At most, he would use it as a deterrent. But this time, he had no choice but to use it. Fellow Taoist Li Shang, I've implicated you this time. Lu Ye's spiritual sense surged again. Since the beginning of the battle here, Li Shang had been hiding in his spirit sea, ready to use the soul possession technique at any time. But so far, Lu Yi didn't need her help. Li Shang's voice sounded. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to worry about it. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have known whose hands I would have fallen into. And I don't know what kind of miserable fate I would have had. At least I feel at ease following you. Lu Yi nodded. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly frowned and looked in a certain direction. For some reason, there was a burst of exclamations, And under his gaze, in the depths of the thick blood sea, there were flashes of fluorescent light, some of which were rippling with colorful colors. Moreover, the blood sea in that direction seemed to be showing signs of melting. Lu Yi thought he was hallucinating, but when he looked carefully, he found that the colorful light was even more intense, and this light was vaguely familiar. The exclamations became more and more intense, as if something incredible had happened in the depths of the blood sea. Soon, Lu Yi realized that he wasn't hallucinating. The blood sea was really melting, because the originally extremely thick blood sea was rapidly thinning and then disappearing. It was also at this moment that the three blood races Sunshine, who had rushed from the central battlefield, met up with the fourth. Before they could understand the specific situation, a colorful light suddenly fell from the sky. Under the light, the surrounding blood sea quickly disappeared, as if it had completely evaporated. Chapter 1600. The colorful light spread out like a cloud of stardust, covering a large area. Wherever the light touched, the sea of blood melted away, revealing the hidden battlefield. The four Blood Clan members, who had just gathered together, saw the stardust approaching them before they could react. They hurriedly activated their blood-red light to protect themselves. But the strange thing was that the colorful stardust ignored the blood-red light and directly invaded their bodies. The next moment, the four Rikahiras were shocked to find that they could no longer control their bodies. What's going on? One of the Blood Clan members was shocked. Another member of the Blood Clan looked up and saw the figure of a huge colorful butterfly star beast. At this moment, this huge butterfly star beast was gently flapping its wings and silently flying towards the depths of the battlefield. Dancer, the Blood Clan member, Rikahiras, recognized the butterfly star beast at a glance and was shocked. The other Rikahiras also saw the butterfly star beast, and they were all grief-stricken. As Sunshine Clan members, there were very few star beasts that could pose a threat to them. Even if they were all Sunshine Clan members, ordinary star beasts were no match for cultivators of other clans in terms of fighting skills. But some star beasts were different. Those star beasts had lived in the universe for countless years, and each of them had mysterious magical powers. Under normal circumstances, even Sunshine Clan members would retreat if they encountered such star beasts. Fortunately, most of the time, these star beasts would not kill easily, so as long as they avoided them, there would be no problem. These star beasts, which had lived for countless years and could pose a threat to Sunshine Clan members, were basically ancient species. Dancer was one of them. The Sunlight of the Blood Clan knew of the existence of the Dancer, because not long ago, they discovered the whereabouts of the Dancer. She had fought with some powerful existence and was injured. Then, she came to this part of the starry sky and hibernated on a desolate star to heal her injuries. Under normal circumstances, this kind of healing process would take at least a few hundred years to complete. Therefore, although the Blood Clan members had discovered Dancer's whereabouts, they did not pay much attention to it. After all, as long as they did not provoke it, it would not do anything to the Blood Clan members. But now, she had left the desolate planet where she hibernated and barged into this battlefield. Why is Dancer here? One of the vampires, Rizhao, asked in surprise. As he asked, he spread out his arms and swayed up and down along with the Dancer's wings. Not only were his arms swaying, even his steps began to move. It looked like he was dancing. As expected of Rizhao, his dancing was really good. It doesn't make sense. The other Rizhao also began to dance. He was confused. He couldn't understand why Dancer, who was supposed to be healing, would suddenly barge into this battlefield. Not a big problem, the third vampire, Sunshine, said. Although the Dancer's talent was mysterious and unpredictable, and even Sunshine couldn't resist it, causing a slight change in the battle situation, their cultivation was still profound. As long as they could hold on for a while, they would naturally be able to get rid of the Dancer's influence. Even Rizhao of the Blood Tribe was dancing, let alone the other cultivators. At this moment, wherever Dancer went, all the Blood Tribe, Insect Tribe, and even human cultivators were affected by her. The reason the blood sea melted was not because it evaporated or anything, but because the blood tribe was affected by Dancer. They couldn't exert their strength, so the blood sea naturally couldn't be maintained. On the warship, a group of people beside Lu Yi were singing and dancing. Even Hoopa wasn't spared. At this moment, his tiger eyes were wide open, and he was twisting around on the deck, looking very confused. Yi danced beautifully. Her posture was as graceful as a fairy's as she danced in circles around Lu Yi. As she spun, she was at a loss as to what to do. Lu Yi, I can't control myself. Lu Yi admired her performance and nodded. It's fine. Turning his head, he saw that everyone on the battleship was dancing. Shui Yuan was even dancing with Wuxia. The two of them were facing each other, and their eyes reflected the other's panicked expression. However, their bodies were out of control. Wang Gulu, Tao Yan, and Zhou Xingji, who had experienced the power of the butterfly star beast, looked at each other in the lively crowd, and saw the complicated look in each other's eyes. Last time, the three of them danced for a whole day under the influence of the butterfly star beast. They regarded it as an unerasable stain in their lives, and they didn't dare to think about it, let alone mention it. Fortunately, after such a long time, they gradually forgot about that embarrassing experience. Who would have thought that it would happen again? And this time, it wasn't just the three of them. More than half of the creatures on the battlefield were affected. As the butterfly star beast went deeper and deeper, more and more creatures were affected. Not far from Lu Yi, Wan Xiao's face was bright red. She was in the late moon jade realm, a pillar of the jade conch realm. But now, she was dancing in front of so many jade conch realm cultivators. It was completely inappropriate for her to do such a thing. But looking around, she wasn't the only one dancing. The entire warship was dancing. Outside the warship, the blood tribe and the insect tribe on the battlefield were also dancing. Even Rizhao of the blood tribe wasn't spared. Fellow Taoist Lu, what's going on? Wan Xiao looked at Lu Yi and asked. Her tone was a little strange, as if she was singing. What she wanted to ask was why Lu Yi wasn't affected. Almost everyone was dancing, but Lu Yi was standing there quietly. He seemed like a crane in a flock of chickens. It's a good thing, Lu Yi replied. He thought that facing the four Rizhao of the insect tribe would be a dead end. Who would have thought that the butterfly star beast would suddenly enter the battlefield? Such a variable was naturally a good thing. How is it a good thing? Wan Xiao said bitterly. She danced and did a split in front of Lu Yi. As expected of a late-stage moon jade realm weapon cultivator, her body was unbelievably soft. Her split was perfectly straight, and her beautiful legs were long and slender. Lu Yi was stunned. Wan Xiao's face was as red as blood. She glared at him fiercely, as if warning him to stop looking. Lu Yi quickly withdrew his gaze and licked his lips. He glanced in the direction of the four blood tribe cultivators, and suppressed the urge to take their lives. Instead, he turned to look in the direction the butterfly star beast flew. Is the bone sun working? In the spirit ocean, Li Shang also noticed the change outside and asked. The bone sun was a treasure obtained from the fortune roulette. Lu Yi didn't know what it was used for. However, on the way back to the 9 prefectures, Lu Yi and Li Shang figured out the use of the bone sun. Its sound could attract the star beasts in the starry sky. As for the specific reason, Lu Yi didn't know. It was because every time he blew the bone sun, a star beast would attack. He had seen the strangeness of the butterfly star beast with his own eyes. He also noticed the strength of the butterfly star beast. After all, it was a powerful existence that could compete with the blue bird. Although it was no match for the blue bird, the fact that the butterfly star beast could compete with the blue bird meant that its strength was extraordinary. Lu Yi also knew that the blue bird escaped into the starry sky after it was injured. Therefore, when Lu Yi sensed that the situation was not good, he took out the bone sun and blew it. He wanted to see if he could attract the butterfly star beast. However, nothing happened for a long time. Lu Yi thought that the butterfly star beast had gone far away, or that the sound of the bone sun had no effect on the butterfly star beast. However, he didn't expect that the butterfly star beast would suddenly appear at this time and turn the already chaotic battlefield into a complete mess. However, Lu Yi wasn't sure whether the butterfly star beast had come here by chance, or was attracted by the sound of his bone son. The four great vampires were singing and dancing over there. For the time being, there was no threat. Therefore, he could ignore them. Now he had to quickly verify the reason why the butterfly star beast had come here. If it was really attracted by the sound of the bone son, then this matter was very promising. Under Lu Ye's close attention, the sea of blood melted wherever the butterfly star beast went. After a short while, the butterfly star beast stopped in a certain area. It gently flapped its wings and stopped moving forward. Lu Yi was overjoyed. He was sure that the butterfly star beast had been attracted by the sound of the bone son, because the place where it stopped was exactly where he had put away the bone son. Obviously, the butterfly star beast had sensed the aura of the bone son, or was sure that the sound of the bone son had appeared here last. Therefore, it stopped here. After realizing this, Lu Yi flew into the sky and headed in a certain direction. The decisive factor in this battle was Rizhao. The four great vampires Rizhao were not a threat for now. So, as long as he could get rid of Baijin and the two insectoids, he would win this battle. However, if he wanted to deal with Rizhao alone, it would be impossible. He could only rely on the butterfly star beast's power. He was very fast. In order to reach the designated location as soon as possible, he didn't care about his own body's exhaustion. In just half a cup of tea's time, Lu Yi arrived at a certain part of the battlefield. From where he was, it was the battlefield where Ningbu Ao and the others were fighting against Baijin and the others. There was also a sea of blood on the battlefield. It must have been caused by Baijin. The auras of the 6 vampires were clear, but the auras of Ningbu Ao and the others were clearly showing signs of exhaustion. After all, fighting in the sea of blood meant that they had no advantage in terms of terrain. Plus, Ningbu Ao and the others had to deal with the 6 vampires. How could they be a match for them? If the 3 vampires hadn't been attracted by the sacred blood and left, Ningbu Ao and the others would have been in a worse situation. Looking past this sunny battlefield, further ahead was the position of the butterfly star beasts. It could be said that the butterfly star beasts were on the same line on the battlefield of Lu Yi and the 6 great suns. After confirming that the location was correct, Lu Yi immediately took out the bone sun and placed it next to his mouth. He stirred up his aura and gently blew into it. At the same time, he looked at the butterfly star beast. Along with the deep sound of the bone sun, the body of the butterfly star beast stationed in the starry sky suddenly moved. Chapter 1602. Baijin was not exaggerating. It was the truth. The physique of a sunshine cultivator was extremely strong, and he was full of vitality. Even if he did not use any energy, he would be able to recover in the blink of an eye with just his physique alone. That was why he said that even if he stood here and let Lu Yi attack him, Lu Yi would not be able to kill him, because the injuries caused by Lu Yi would heal very quickly. A constellation cultivator would never be able to expand an injury to the extent that it could threaten Rizhao's life, unless he exhausted his vitality. But Dancer's influence was limited. How could such a small injury exhaust Baijin's vitality? After saying that, Baijin suddenly felt that something was wrong. The injury that should have healed quickly seemed to be blocked by some kind of power, and it did not heal immediately. He could not help but be surprised. The only thing that could affect the recovery of Rizhao's physical body was always Rizhao's power. Logically speaking, it was impossible for Lu Yi, a constellation cultivator, to do so. In fact, it was not Lu Ye's power that affected Baijin's recovery, but Hui's power. As a member of the soldier race, the Ho itself had many strange abilities. The Cyan Hall inside allowed Lu Yi to obtain the legacies left behind by his ancestors, tempering his blade techniques. The Ho itself was not only extremely sharp, but also had a tearing ability. A strange power lingered around the wound caused by Hui, and under the influence of that power, it was very difficult for the wound to heal. Lu Yi could even use Hui to control this power, causing the wound to tear apart. It could be said that if Baijin and Lu Yi were both constellations, even if we only made a small wound, Lu Yi could expand it and continue to tear the enemy's body apart. It was less effective against Yu Yao, and even less effective against Ri Zhao. Otherwise, Lu Yi only needed to use Hui to rapidly expand the wound and kill Bai Jin on the spot. How much power the Ho could unleash would depend entirely on Lu Ye's cultivation level. After the soldier tribe recognized its master, its power would gradually increase along with the strength of the weapon cultivator it recognized. In other words, it would be unsealed. Because every soldier tribe had existed for countless years, they themselves were top-notch treasures. Even if it couldn't kill Bai Jin on the spot, Pyrolyte's power was still working, which prevented Bai Jin's wounds from healing quickly. Although Bai Jin was a little surprised, he did not panic. If Lu Yi could only use this much strength, it would be very difficult to kill him in a short period of time. Of course, it would be hard to say if it took a long time. Under the premise that his injuries could not recover quickly, as long as there was enough time, Lu Yi might really be able to cut off his head. Ning Bueo and the others watched with wide eyes. They were in a rush. When they saw that Lu Yi wasn't affected by the dancer, they thought they could turn the tables. But in their excitement, they forgot about the huge difference between Lu Yi and Bai Jin's cultivation. Realizing that Lu Yi wouldn't be able to kill Bai Jin in a short amount of time, Luo Xie shouted, "Young friend, hurry and send a message to a Pyron." This was a good opportunity. Lu Yi could move freely, and there was no one to stop him. As long as he left the battlefield for a Pyron would be able to get information on this side and make preparations. Lu Yi ignored him and stared deeply at Bai Jin in front of him. Bai Jin's heart skipped a beat. He had a bad feeling about this. The next moment, he saw Lu Ye's body shine with a bloody light. It became a ball of blood that wrapped around his body. A secret skill of the blood path? Bai Jin was shocked. He didn't know why Lu Yi was using a secret skill of the blood path. Using a secret skill of the blood path in front of a blood was like showing off in front of an expert. But then, a powerful and strong divine nature enveloped him. Bai Jin, who was dancing in the blood ball, had a great change in expression as he cried out in shock. After he screamed, his power dropped. Although it didn't fall below Riri's, it was barely enough to keep him at Riri's level. Inside the ball of blood, Lu Yi held the Pan Shan knife in a reverse grip. His other hand gripped the scabbard tightly. Then he assumed a strange posture. In the next moment his body spun, and the Pan Mountain saber slashed fiercely and swiftly at Bai Jin's neck. The ferocious slash deepened Bai Jin's wound. Bai Jin frowned in pain. But compared to his injury, he was more shocked by the holy aura Lu Yi was displaying. Another slash came down, and it seemed to be faster and stronger than before. The third slash, the fourth slash. Lu Yi's body spun faster and faster, until his entire body became a blur. A storm of blades swirled around him. Windmill. Although he had only experienced Qing Fu's dual blade secret technique once, he had been fighting against Qing Fu for a long time, so he had more or less grasped the essence of the dual blade secret technique. Although he couldn't perform it as freely as Qing Fu, he could still perform it. The only difference was that he didn't have dual blades, only a scabbard. Thus, the power of the technique wasn't satisfactory, and could only be displayed by half. Normally, Lu Yi wouldn't have used a secret skill like that in a fight. It would have been exposing his weakness to the enemy, but now was the perfect time to use it. Bai Jin couldn't fight back, and he had Riri's body. Where could he find such a good target? Blood splattered everywhere, accompanied by Bai Jin's scream. The two bugs, Riri and Ning Bueo, had no idea what was happening inside the ball of blood, but from Bai Jin's scream, they knew he was in a bad situation. Star Constellation couldn't really kill Riri, could she? This strange thought appeared in everyone's mind. Inside the ball of blood, Lu Ye's presence was getting stronger. Bai Jin's presence was getting weaker and weaker. Normally, a slash like that would have sent Bai Jin flying, but he was trapped inside the ball of blood, so he could only stay where he was. In 3 breaths, Lu Yi had lost track of how many slashes he had made. When the last slash came out, the resistance against the blade suddenly lightened. At the same time, Lu Yi could clearly feel his flesh and blood being torn apart. There were many inheritances inside Riri. No matter which one it was a huge burden on the body. That was especially true of Qing Ri's double-blade secret skill. This was the first time Lu Yi had used it, and his target was Ri. He didn't dare hold back. He used too much strength, and his flesh and blood were damaged. Under the watchful eyes of the other Ri elites, the ball of blood surrounding Lu Yi and Bai Jin suddenly shrank, revealing two figures inside. Lu Yi was still holding his blade in one hand, and his scabbard in the other. He stood there quietly, but his blood was boiling. His spiritual power was boiling. His skin and face were red. It was obvious he had used up a lot of energy. Not far in front of him, Bai Jin's body was stiff. He looked at Lu Yi in shock, his eyes wide open. However, at this moment, he actually did not move his body. When the two bugs saw this, they felt a lot of emotions. Suddenly, there was a burst of blood. Bai Jin's neck was bleeding, and his head flew high into the air. Ri was killed. The two bugs were shocked. When they looked at Lu Yi again, their faces changed. Ningbu Ao and the others were overjoyed. They had thought this was impossible, but Lu Yi had actually done it. It was unthinkable for a Xing Su to kill Ri, even if Ri couldn't fight back. But now it had happened right in front of their eyes. Wuxia shouted, "Little friend, continue to kill. Kill them all. Ha ha ha." This was really a turn of events. They thought they were going to die. Who would have thought that Dancer would barge into the battlefield and disrupt the battle? Now Lu Yi from the ninth sky had come out of nowhere to save them. It didn't take long for Lu Yi to kill Bai Jin, so all he had to do was to kill the two insectoids and the four blood breeds. Once Dancer's influence was gone, the three of them would be able to kill as they pleased. By then, no matter how many insectoids and blood breeds there wouldn't be enough to kill. Lu Yi didn't move, nor did he respond. He maintained his posture. It wasn't that he didn't want to move, he couldn't. He had underestimated the aftereffects of using the great windmill. Although he looked fine on the surface, most of his flesh and blood had ruptured. Not to mention using the great windmill again. He could not even use half of his usual strength. Plus, he had been able to kill Bai Jin mostly because of the suppression of his holy nature. Against the bugs, the holy nature had no effect. Plus, the bugs' shells were much stronger than the blood tribes. Wuxia urged again. Seeing that Lu Yi still didn't move, he immediately realized that something was wrong with Lu Yi's situation, and his heart sank. Currently on the battlefield, there were only 3 Rakashi on their side. Even if Bai Jin died, the enemy still had 6. If they couldn't close this gap in a short period of time, once everyone got rid of Dancer's influence, they would still be waiting for death. Wuxia couldn't help but sigh. Today's battle had truly been a tumultuous one. At first, they had thought that victory was within their grasp, but because of Bai Jin, all of their efforts had been ruined. Instead, they had been surrounded by the blood breeds, and had fallen into a dangerous situation. Dancer had appeared out of nowhere, disrupting the battle, and Lu Yi had forcefully killed Bai Jin, bringing them hope. Now that hope had been shattered, Wuxia and the others had experienced the ups and downs of life a few times that day. Even someone as strong as Ri couldn't handle it. After a few dozen breaths, Lu Yi let out a breath. He slowly moved his body and sheathed his Pan Shan knife. He looked at Ningbu Ao and the others and asked, "Which of you has the strongest killing power?" He had a guess, but he still had to ask. Ningbu Ao and the others didn't know. Chapter 1603. Their eyes met, and Lu Yi said, "This is the first time I've used this ability. It may be a little painful, but please bear with it." It was impossible for him to kill all the Nikitas by himself. Bai Jin had no power to fight back, and he had to rely on the suppression of the blood breed's divinity. He also had to use a double-blade secret technique, like the great windmill, to cut off his head. There were 2 Nikitas here, and there were 4 blood breeds over there. He didn't know how long it would take for him to kill them. Lu Yi didn't know how long Dancer's magical power could affect Nikitas, but Wangu Lu and the others were only affected for a day. They were constellations, and they could get rid of Dancer's influence in a day, let alone Nikitas. The effect of Dancer's magical power on Nikitas was estimated to last no more than an hour, and now half an hour had passed, and Nikitas could get rid of it at any time. Therefore, Lu Yi felt that it was better to leave the task of killing Nikitas to the other Nikitas. Li Guan's killing power was the strongest, and she was undoubtedly the most suitable candidate. The talent tree could burn the power that invaded Dancer's body, and after the talent tree's third transformation, the power of burning could be applied to others. Lu Yi had been aware of this for a long time. The first time he helped Yi burn the soul-devouring aphids in the Divine Sense Sea was Lu Ye's first attempt. However, that was after all in the Divine Sense Sea. But this time the target was Li Guan's body. It was indeed the first time, and Lu Yi wasn't sure how effective it would be. The only thing he was sure of was that Li Guan wouldn't feel too good. After all, the burning power of the talent tree would definitely cause a certain degree of damage to her body, while burning Dancer's power. Li Guan didn't understand, but as Lu Yi used it, she could clearly feel a scorching power spreading from Lu Ye's palm and invading her body. Normally, it was impossible for the spiritual power of a constellation to invade Nichita's body, but Li Guan couldn't control herself at the moment, let alone mobilize her spiritual power. So this kind of invasion became possible. Feeling the purity and majesty of the spiritual power, Li Guan couldn't help but be moved. If she hadn't experienced it herself, it would be hard to believe that a constellation could temper their spiritual power to such an extent. Back when she was at the constellation realm, her refinement of spiritual power was far inferior to Lu Ye's. Su Dingyang, the strongest constellation of this generation in her domain, had once been defeated by Lu Yi. She had heard Kong Qing mention this before, and she knew that Lu Yi was much stronger than Su Dingyang. However, knowing was one thing, and she had not seen it with her own eyes. Until now, possessing such pure and majestic spiritual energy, it was no wonder that Su Dingyang would be defeated. Not to mention Su Dingyang. Even when she was at the later stage of the constellation realm, she would definitely not be a match for Lu Yi of the Nine Heavens. Distracting thoughts flashed through his mind, and Li Guan's expression began to become bewildered. Because as Lu Ye's spiritual power invaded her body, she actually felt something burning in her body. Gradually, the uncontrollable abnormality of her body eased a little. Although she still couldn't control her body, compared to before, there were indeed changes. Her eyes suddenly flashed with shock, as she finally realized what Lu Yi was doing. He was actually helping her get rid of the dancer's power. It wasn't accurate to describe it as expelling. A more direct feeling was burning. Lu Ye's power that invaded her body was like a fire, while the dancer's power was like a block of ice. Wherever the flames passed, the ice began to melt. She had been a little puzzled before. There were so many creatures on the battlefield, whether they were humans, insects, or vampires, whether it was Rizhao, Yu Yao, or Constellation, everyone was affected by the dancer's power. Why was it that Lu Yi was not affected? She had thought that he was just lucky that he wasn't affected by the dancer's power. But now it seemed that it wasn't luck at all. Instead, he had the power to restrain the dancer's power. But how is this possible? Even Ri Zhao on the battlefield couldn't resist the dancer's strange power. So how could a mere constellation restrain it? But now it seemed that not only could he restrain it himself, he could even help others resolve it. She could clearly feel that Lu Yi was controlling his own power, not daring to use it too intensely. This was because when the fire burned away the dancer's strange power, it also caused some damage to her flesh, causing Li Guan to feel pain. She immediately said, "Don't hold back. Just do your best." She was under the sun, so how could she not endure such pain? When Lu Yi heard this, he knew that this was indeed not the time to be concerned. Even if Li Guan was really injured, he had to let her recover her ability to move as soon as possible. Without any hesitation, he activated the power of the talent tree with all his might. The fire that had invaded Li Guan's body immediately burned fiercely. Even as strong as Li Guan was, she couldn't help but groan. Her face flushed unnaturally red. Ningbu Ao and Luo Xia watched from a distance. At first, they didn't know what Lu Yi was doing, but as they watched, their eyes lit up with joy. This was because Li Guan, who had been singing and dancing with them, had begun to slow down. In less than half a cup of tea's time, Li Guan had completely stopped. She had broken free of the dancer's influence. The two insects' eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They wanted to run away, but they couldn't control their bodies. As soon as she regained control of her body, Li Guan nodded at Lu Yi and said gratefully, "Thank you for your help, little friend." As soon as she finished speaking, the clear sound of a sword rang out. Li Guan's entire body seemed to have turned into a sharp sword. Then, she became one with the sword. A sword light that seemed to be able to tear apart the starry sky flew toward one of the insects, Rizhao. That cold sword light swept past the insectoid Ri and dispersed not far away, revealing Li Guan's figure. He held a long sword in his hand, slanted downwards, but at the tip of the sword, there was a drop of blood that did not disperse. The insect's body suddenly stiffened. Under the horrified gaze of his companions, a drop of blood appeared between his eyebrows. Then his life force dissipated. Li Guan didn't attack again. Instead, he calmed himself down. Lu Ye's unbridled attack just now had messed up the mana in her body. Her physical body was damaged quite a bit. In order to kill the insect, she had used all of her strength. Coupled with the fact that she was already injured, she was a little tired after that attack. She needed to rest for a while before she could attack again. Ningbu Ao and Luo Xie were stunned. When Li Guan had broken free from the dancer's control, they had expected this to happen. But when it actually happened, they were both shocked and excited. Luo Xie shouted, "Little friend, come and help me." Where else could he find such an opportunity to kill an elite of the same level? He had to ask Lu Yi to help him. If it was too late, Rizhao would be killed by Li Guan. Luo Xie regretted it. If he had known this would happen, he would have volunteered to help Lu Yi. Luo Xie had just finished speaking when Ningbu Ao's voice rang out. "Little friend, don't mind him. He is just a weak spell cultivator. What can he do? Come and help me. We are both weapon cultivators. We should help each other." Luo Xie was so angry that his nose was crooked. He was already so old. He wasn't delicate at all. Plus, Ningbu Ao wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. He had never seen him act so shamelessly before. Lu Yi flew toward Ningbu Ao. It wasn't because they were both weapon cultivators, but because Ningbu Ao was closer to him. Lu Yi used his power to help Ningbu Ao, but he didn't forget to shout at Luo Xie, "Elder Luo, please wait. I'm on my way." Luo Xie sighed helplessly. He knew he wouldn't be able to kill Rizhao. Li Guan could move freely now. Ningbu Ao would get rid of the dancer's control. There were only a few Rizhao left on the battlefield. They wouldn't be able to kill him. Although they were far away from the other four-blood Rizhao, Rizhao's eyesight was very strong. He could see everything that was happening. When they saw Lu Yi killed by Jin, they were terrified. They were afraid they would be next. But when they saw Lu Ye's condition change, the blood Rizhao understood that Lu Yi wouldn't be able to do anything else. Not long after they made up their minds, Li Guan could move freely again. In an instant he had killed Rizhao. Seeing that Ningbu Ao was about to break free from the dancer's influence, the few Sunshine Blood kindred started to panic. They were all sitting ducks now. They couldn't fight back against any attack. They couldn't even dodge. If they were attacked by a Sunshine Blood kindred, they would surely die. They were all angry. For the sake of Indefinite and the other planets, the Blood Rizhao and the bugs had planned for 400 years. The most important thing was for Bai Jin to enter Quiet Moon and gain their trust. That way he could become a Rizhao. When Bai Jin went to Quiet Moon, there was only Yu Yao. To raise Yu Yao into a Rizhao, even if Bai Jin had the potential, it would take a lot of resources. Finally, Bai Jin became a Rizhao. His position in Quiet Moon was stable. The plan of the two races was finally on the right track. Everything was progressing smoothly. The insectoid nest seemed to have landed there by accident, but in reality, it had been planned for a long time. Otherwise, even if there were two Rakagas guarding an insectoid nest, they would not have dared to stay so brazenly outside a star system like a Pyrrhon. Things developed just as the experts of the two races had planned. The four galaxies sent out many experts to encircle and annihilate them. As long as these experts were eaten, the four galaxies' foundations would be greatly damaged. Then, the two races would be able to take down Indestructible and use it as a base to gradually nibble away at the other three galaxies. Great things were just around the corner. If nothing unexpected happened, The 4-star system would belong to the blood Rizhao and the bugs. However, an accident had happened. Moreover, it was an unimaginable accident. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.